Chapter 77. Take a look at this. If there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me. Jiang Pingji threw the booklet she had compiled over the past few days to Suku. It was filled with training plans she had made based on the situation in ancient times. In order to come up with these things, she had really racked her brain. It was not that the training plan was difficult, but it was very difficult to make it simple. For example, the training she had undergone since she was a child. All kinds of equipment were currently the most popular mainstream equipment, and the training schedule was also constantly changing according to the growth of her physical fitness. There were strict standards for her 3 meals a day, all in order to maximize the potential of her body. However, this era was too backward. There was no specially formulated nutrient solution, no professional training equipment, no suitable training grounds, and even the people who participated in the training were not even as good as the children of her era in all aspects. She had deleted and modified her own standards over and over again to come up with the finished product today. However, in her eyes, the training content was already very relaxed, but in Suku's eyes, it was like a sudden clap of thunder. Of course, he wasn't thinking about how amazing Jiang Pingji's training techniques were, nor was he surprised at how exceptional the training plan was. He wasn't even praising Jiang Pingji's prowess. Instead, he was regretting. Did a donkey kick him in the head last night? Why did she feel that the person in front of her was a kind and gentle lord? Lang Jun, you mustn't do that. Those servants are just ordinary people. This kind of torture, unconsciously, Suku voiced out his most honest opinion of the plan. As soon as the words left his mouth, his expression changed. Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows. She understood what Suku meant, and her face turned green. Wait, he said, torture. The two of them looked at each other. In the eyes of the Livestream viewers, they were dumbstruck. Turu Feicho, #PickNose1. What kind of training plan did the host come up with? Young Su seems to be scared silly. Hongyan Yuntian, hahaha, streamer, there's something wrong with this time travel script. Shouldn't the plot be about Suku holding the training plan with both hands and being amazed by it, then being subdued by the host's domineering aura, kowtowing to the host and becoming a brain-dead fan? Hit me if you don't agree, you're right. I'm ready to witness the historic scene of the post-starter subduing his underlings. Why did the two of them end up looking at each other dumbstruck? This scene was so King awkward. Looking at the screen full of ha, Jiang Pingji was multitasking expressionlessly. She stared at Suku and the scrolling comments on the screen. To paraphrase the audience, if he didn't follow the script, it would be really awkward. Is it really that harsh? She picked up the training book that Suku dropped in shock. How could it become the torture you mentioned? Suku could hear the gloominess in Jiang Pingji's tone. His heart sank, and he realized that he might have misunderstood her. He deliberated and said, Lang Jun was born with divine strength, and your talent is different from ordinary people. The contents listed above are naturally nothing to you. However, those slaves that were bought are all ordinary people. How can the flesh of ordinary people compare to yours? Seeing him carefully flatter her and then tactfully say that the standards for the content were too strict, Jiang Pingji's gloominess dissipated. In your opinion, what is appropriate? Jiang Pingji's tone was calm, and there was a serious look in her eyes. It showed that she was sincerely asking for advice, and not trying to get even with him later. Suku hesitated for a while, and instead of answering, he asked, Lang Jun, why are you spending so much effort? You may have heard from the slaves about what happened to me a few days ago. I don't want to go through that kind of situation again in my life. Training these servants is to find a place for myself to settle down. Dongqing seems to be peaceful now, but even a place like Hejin County is full of bandits. If I don't have a place to settle down, I may be killed one day. As soon as Jiang Pingji finished speaking, Su Ke suddenly shook his head and retorted, Lang Jun, do you really only care about this? If it's just to clean up the bandits and protect the house, 30 to 50 people are enough. Why do you need to mobilize so many people? I'm afraid you have other unspeakable thoughts. Since you said it's unspeakable thoughts, how can I answer your question directly? Su Ke was speechless. He didn't expect Jiang Pingji to be so unpredictable. There was another burst of laughter on the screen, but this time it was not Jiang Pingji who was laughing at her. Instead, they all felt sorry for Su Ke. Hit me if you're not convinced, the longest road that Su Ke has walked in his life is definitely the streamer's unconventional ways. Cafeteria Daffin Auntie, young Su Ke, give it a rub. The streamer doesn't care about you, but Auntie cares about you. Carry me away, kiss me. The price of a blue and white asterisk was equivalent to a lollipop and a lover's heart, and one asterisk was equivalent to one Livestream coin. Bideo President, young Su Ke, don't be lured away by that weird auntie. Come into my arms. Domineering President, tipped 520 kidney apples. One kidney apple was equivalent to one Livestream coin. 520 kidney apples were 520 Livestream coins. Apart from these two people, there were even more rewards. The screen was full of rewards that almost drowned Jiang Pingji's vision. The backstage notifications came one after another, densely packed, with no signs of stopping. Fortunately, she was expressionless, so no one saw through her. Su Ke didn't know that thousands of people had taken turns to feel sorry for him countless times. His face, which was gradually becoming more determined, showed a trace of a strange expression. His eyes were especially bright and eye-catching. I already understand what you're thinking, Lang Jun. I won't let you down. Okay, you think about it. Seeing that, Jiang Pingji already knew what Su Ke was thinking, but she didn't point it out. Afternoon, you'll go out with me to have a look. We'll have a preliminary plan, so it'll be easier to carry it out in the future. She originally planned to let Su Ke carry out the plan, but now there was a situation, and the standards she set were still too strict. One person is better than two. Su Ke knew the level of ordinary people in ancient times better than she did, so his suggestion was worth taking. According to my initial plan, we should do it step by step, increasing the difficulty of the training step by step. Just as Jiang Pingji finished, Su Ke's heart was sweating profusely. Recalling the contents of the booklet, he couldn't imagine how terrifying the intensity of the training would be if it was done step by step. It wasn't training tigers and wolves, it was clearly training people to death. Chapter 78. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Those with potential are still young, but the older ones don't have enough nutrition, and their overall quality is not good. If they are forced to meet the training standards, they might be lying on the road to training before they become a strong army. However, Jiang Pingji's family was very rich. They didn't have many things, but they had enough food to fill their stomachs. Currently, there were only a dozen or so servants in the farm. She could afford to feed them. I carefully read what you wrote. Although it is harsh, there are some good points in it. Su Ke was worried that Jiang Pingji would be angry, but after careful observation, he didn't see any displeasure on her face, so he plucked up his courage and continued, the so-called elite troops are no less than elite weapons, and there are even more elite soldiers. What are elite soldiers? They are strong, fierce, and good at fighting. Strict discipline, strict laws, and strict execution of orders are the second. In my opinion, the latter is the most important. No matter how strong a soldier was, he was only one person, and he could only exert the strength of one person. But if 100 people acted as one, moved in unison, and exerted their strength in one place, what would the result be? Although every training item in Jiang Pingji's plan was frighteningly harsh, and it didn't seem like it could be completed by a normal person, Su Ku only read it once, but he still found something she emphasized: discipline. Jiang Pingji nodded approvingly. Su Ku's performance was much better than she had imagined. Indeed. I read a novel a few days ago. The content was about a fierce general of the previous dynasty who could come in and out of the chaotic army as if there was no one there. His heroic posture was like that of a god, and the army couldn't touch him. But in my opinion, it is a bit ridiculous. Su Ku was slightly stunned by Jiang Pingji's arrogant words. Although it was only a few words, he could tell who the fierce general of the previous dynasty was, so he was even more confused. That was the peerless general who had followed Emperor Taizu of the Xia dynasty to war, the god of war who had created an extraordinary career, Meng Jing, Meng Ziliang. You don't believe me? Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows. She stood up and took down the bow and arrows. She said to Su Ku, "Why do you think it's the general who is too brave and not the enemy who is too useless? In my opinion, it's just a normal elite soldier running into a bunch of idiots. If he was a real tiger, wolf, or lion, how could he have fallen into the awkward situation of a group of dragons without a leader and allowed a mortal with a body of flesh and blood to move freely in the army formation? Was it because the horse beneath him was as fast as lightning, and even the arrows couldn't catch up? Or could it be that his body was made of copper and iron and was impervious to swords and spears? They're just a bunch of cowards who have no discipline, no desire to win, and only fear death. Ants could even bite an elephant to death. How could an army of 10,000 people not be able to stop a mortal with flesh and blood? Even if Jiang Pingji was in her previous life, she wouldn't dare to say that she could face tens of thousands of blades and escape unscathed. What she wanted were tigers, wolves, and lions. Those were people who would truly put their heads on their waistbands and fight to the death. Not to mention a general riding a white horse, even a giant riding an elephant would be chopped into minced meat by a flurry of knives. Su Ku's rationality told him that what Jiang Pingji said was too idealistic and too absurd. However, when he thought of the scene of 10,000 people acting as one, orderly, and disciplined, he couldn't help but feel his blood boil. Even his brain began to heat up. Cafeteria Daffin Auntie, the young man is done for. Badeo Zhangzi, this streamer is poisonous. She's contagious. San Sha Sha, is Su Ku possessed by a chinibu? It feels like his eyes are glowing. Nongfu Shangquan Yudi Yangshuan, I don't care. I just love the streamer who is in the late stage of chinibu. Jiang Pingji sneaked a peek at the comments on the bullet screen. The little bit of blood that had just risen was instantly extinguished. Instead, there was a sweet feeling of awkwardness and helplessness in her heart. If there was a king who ruined the atmosphere, it would definitely be the audience who laughed all day long. She raised her hand and patted Su Ku, who was immersed in the hot blood, and said in a hoarse voice, "Where was I just now?" Continue, Su Ku, his blood was not boiling yet. It was very inhumane to pat him halfway to wake him up. Did you understand? Although Jiang Pingji said it lightly, it was no different from wishful thinking to achieve that step with the current conditions. Strict enforcement of orders and prohibitions. This phrase seemed to be simple, but it was very difficult to achieve. The first problem was the ridiculously high illiteracy rate in this era. If they could not even fully understand the orders, how could they carry them out accurately? The second problem was the ridiculously low execution rate in this era. As mentioned before, there were as many as 350,000 people participating in a war. The real deciding factor might not even be 50,000 people. What were the other 300,000 people for? Basically, they were there to do nothing, to gain experience and military merits, or to fish in troubled waters, just to fill their stomachs with military pay. If their side won, they would charge forward while they had the advantage of numbers. If they lost, they would turn around and run away. Apart from those who did nothing, the remaining 50,000 elite troops were very unqualified in Jiang Pingji's eyes. They were far from the standard of tigers, wolves, and lions. In the chaos, the elite troops might be able to suppress their inner fear of death and carry out the orders of their superiors. Of course, this possibility was very small. It was more likely that they would take advantage of the chaos to become deserters and only care about their own lives. This was because after the army was defeated, the first to bear the brunt of being demoted was the leader, not the large number of troops. Because of this, in ancient times, the morale of the troops was very important. Otherwise, it would be extremely easy for the troops to be disorganized and unable to recover after a setback. Unless they encountered an enemy who was more dispirited than them, if the difference in the number of troops between the two sides was not big, their side would definitely lose. However, at the end of the day, to put it bluntly, there was only one word: discipline. When a group of disciplined sheep met a group of disorganized wolves, they would win without any suspense. After a deep conversation, Su Ke's eyes opened wider and wider. The way he looked at Jiang Pingji from time to time was a bit fiery. At first, he only thought that she was just an ordinary aristocratic family's son who was greedy for beauty. Later, after the incident at the assembly, she bravely stood up for him. Su Ke labeled Jiang Pingji as quite powerful, arrogant and unruly, and dissolute. After what happened last night, he felt that she was shrewd and seemed to have everything under her control, including people's hearts. Now, his impression of her was refreshed again. If Su Ke had been a little unwilling before, he had now completely put away his previous attitude and understood his position. Even if he was just a layman, just by listening to her talk, he felt that the small military formation she mentioned was very feasible. Indeed, the person in front of him was going to do something big. Dongqing had not completely fallen into chaos yet, but she was already thinking about how to do it. Chapter 79. After experiencing his mother's unjust death and the fact that he almost died of injustice, Su Ke's impression of the aristocratic families had dropped to the lowest level. When he lost all his dignity and was manipulated like a commodity by the human traffickers, he had even fantasized crazily that if he could rise to prominence one day, he would definitely take revenge on those vermin of the country who did not know the suffering of the people and had no regard for human life. However, these thoughts were just thoughts. Not to mention those aristocratic families with deep foundations, even the local gentry could easily control his life and death, let alone the fact that he was now just an official slave. He had gone from a commoner to a lowly commoner, and there was an irremovable mark of humiliation on his face. He had long since lost all hope in this life. However, due to a freak combination of factors, it was bought by this special Lang Jun from an aristocratic family. It was as if a completely different life door had been opened. Su Ke had thought that he was arrogant, and couldn't bear to listen to any unpleasant words, but in fact, he was surprisingly easy to talk to. Of course, Su Ke wouldn't treat this Lang Jun as a harmless little rabbit just because he had taken his advice several times. Not only was the other party not a harmless bunny, it was a silent tiger that seemed to be resting lazily but was actually extremely dangerous. She took his advice only because it was useful. Even so, Jiang Pingji's reaction was beyond Su Ke's expectation. To describe it in modern terms, it would probably be, this young master of the aristocratic family was different from those coquettish wretches outside. He was exceptionally pure and unpretentious. For example, now, he didn't understand. Lang Jun was the only legitimate son of the second branch of the Liu family. According to the gossip of the other servants, the second branch of the Liu family was extremely rich. So, as a noble scholar, how could she know the price of rice, vegetables, and fruits so clearly? He even remembered the prices in the last few days. At most, He would praise Lu Langjun for having an outstanding memory, for having a photographic memory, and for being able to recall what he heard. But why was he smiling and bargaining with the merchants like an ordinary farmer? That stingy bargaining technique stunned him. He couldn't help but have an illusion that the second branch of the Lu family was so poor that they couldn't even feed themselves. Su-ku wasn't the only one who was dumbfounded. The audience watching the live broadcast were also so shocked that they dropped the melons in their hands. Cafeteria Daffin Auntie, what an almighty streamer. She's so cool even when she's haggling. Lon Chue Yubuja, bargaining and whatnot, it feels super down to earth. But host, didn't you notice that he was about to cry? Wujiang Sha Kai Yi, ha 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 ha, the shopkeepers who almost cried when the streamer tried to bargain with them. Hit me if you don't agree, I'm relieved. I'm thankful that the host isn't from this world. Otherwise, it would be too scary. As an experienced clothing store owner, I felt that if I met such a troublesome customer, I would suffer a huge loss. I wouldn't be able to continue my business. A group of spectators expressed that Jiang Pingji was very good at bargaining. Although they felt sorry for the shop owner, they were still happy to watch the show. However, other than the onlookers who only knew how to laugh, there was also Su-ku. Langjun, you. Su-ku wanted to say that she was calculative, but that was not a good word. He was also afraid of offending her, so he awkwardly said, "If this gets out, it will greatly damage your reputation." A noble son of an aristocratic family bargaining with a merchant. Even if he maintained his demeanor, it was inevitable that he would have a bad reputation if it got out. Jiang Pingji sneered and said carelessly, "You speak as if I, your Langjun, have a reputation. Who in Heijin County doesn't know the reputation of the Lu Manor's prodigal son? The manor does not lack money and rice, but you don't know how expensive it is if you don't manage the household." These merchants saw that I was dressed well, and I was young and ignorant, so they asked for an exorbitant price. They raised a price of 1 copper coin to 10 copper coins. Do I look like a fat sheep to you? Shou Shiguan, how can there be such a cruel sheep like the host in this world? It was the shopkeeper who was being ripped off. As soon as this comment came out, all the viewers who were watching the live broadcast immediately agreed. That was absolutely right. Su-ku silently looked up at the sky. After that day's fair, the reputation of his Langjun had indeed spread, but it was accompanied by the comments of the prodigal son. There were both praise and criticism. However, none of the masters in the manor cared, and the people involved even took the initiative to push the reputation onto themselves. Moreover, if I don't tell them my name, how will they know who I am? Even if they ask, I will only say that my name is Su Xiaoyu, and I am the servant of the Lu Manor's Langjun. As soon as Jiang Pingji said this, Su-ku, who was following behind her, almost stumbled and fell. Could it be that his main task in the Lu Manor was not to accompany her in her studies, but to help her Langjun be the scapegoat? After showing Su-ku around, Jiang Pingji asked again, "Have you memorized everything?" Su-ku nodded. Although his memory was not as good as Jiang Pingji's, he still had a photographic memory, so he remembered everything. That's good. In the future, you will be in charge of the farm's expenses and purchases. Make an account book and record everything. You have to be strict with their training. If anyone dares to slack off, you will be severely punished. There will be no room for mercy. If there is punishment, there will be rewards. For those who perform well, you should also be rewarded appropriately. We are still short on manpower, so it shouldn't be difficult to manage. Jiang Pingji bought Su-ku to be the accountant, manage the household affairs, and supervise the training of the servants. One person could take on multiple roles. According to Lu Shi, he would not interfere in this matter, so she had to figure it out on her own. In fact, she did not need others to tell her what to do. Before Su-ku could answer, Jiang Pingji continued, this is your training and training. Armchair strategizing is just empty talk. If you want to verify your own ideas, you have to put them into practice. You don't have to do everything yourself, but you have to be aware of it. You won't be deceived by your subordinates. Don't think that these purchases are simple. There is more to it than meets the eye. It was the same thing, but the quality was different, and the price was different. It was hard to guarantee that no one would use shoddy goods to cheat him. Don't think that it was a small matter. What if you looked at the bigger picture and the more detailed picture? There were many ways to go about it. For a long time, Su Ku did not say a word. Instead, he looked at Jiang Pingji with surprise and suspicion. His eyes seemed to be overstepping his authority. Jiang Pingji asked, "What are you looking at?" Su Ku felt as if his worldview had been reshaped. His impression of the gentry's son had also been reset. He said gently, "I never thought that you would be so familiar with these household affairs." A gentry's son had a more detailed understanding of the prices of goods than a former commoner like him. He knew the prices of all the shops, stalls, taverns, and eateries within a few miles. Wasn't he the pampered son of the inner house? You wanted to say that I haggled over every penny. What, you changed your mind in less than a quarter of an hour? Chapter 80. However, no matter how Su Ku thought about it, he did not seem to have said what he was thinking. However, he did not continue to think about it. He only thought that he had inadvertently let the cat out of the bag, so he immediately apologized. "Why do you have to make it so formal?" Jiang Pingji moved sideways and only accepted half of the bow. "Moreover, you did nothing wrong. If what happened just now was spread, people would definitely say that Lang Jun of the Lus is stingy and harsh." "You are right." Su Ku was right. She just did not care about her reputation. What did other people's words have to do with her? Su Ku said sullenly, "Even so, Lang Jun is open-minded and open-minded. I don't think you would care about other people's opinions." So, his previous persuasion was just nonsense to Jiang Pingji, and his unspoken criticism was a taboo. Jiang Pingji did not say anything. Her head hurt, so she poked the system. She complained, "System, I feel like the generation gap between him and me is too big. I don't think I blamed him just now, did I? Did he have to act like he was guilty and remorseful?" The system said, "This is probably the difference between a gentleman and a hooligan." Jiang Pingji was speechless. Damn it. Su Ku realized that his Lang Jun was not only familiar with all kinds of affairs, but she was also passionate about carpentry, which others thought was cheap and distracting. She had bought a lot of wood and tools when she went out. Was she going to do carpentry herself? But this time, no matter how many thoughts he had, he did not voice them. He chose to watch silently and wanted to know the deeper meaning behind his Lang Jun's actions. He had a feeling that Jiang Pingji would not keep him confused for too long this time. Sitting outside the carriage, Su Ku looked down. His eyes fell on a familiar place, and he could not help but be stunned. It had only been a few days, but he felt as if it had been a lifetime. That night, he had tried his best to escape from the prison, but he did not expect to be intercepted by Lu Shi and his men. Later, he became Lu Shi's page boy. While they were still on the road, they could see smoke rising from the farmhouse from afar. They could vaguely see the silhouettes of people plowing the fields, a few children chasing and playing, and even a white-haired old farmer sitting at the entrance of the village, smoking from time to time, looking peaceful and leisurely. Jiang Pingji lifted the curtain of the carriage and looked into the distance. The audience in the streaming room could also see the high-definition live stream. "Papa, don't hit me, it feels like my hometown. I remember when I was young, the village was not developed yet. When it was mealtime, smoke would rise from the chimneys of every house. When I saw this, I knew it was time to go back and eat. Tong Hua Shun Yi say, yes, yes, yes. It's the same in my hometown. When he was young, he didn't have a kindergarten. He basically let them run around the mountains when he was crazy. But now, there were only a few elderly people in the village. The younger ones had all gone out to work. Rensha Wangka Shoming, I grew up in the city. I've eaten pork, but I've never seen a live pig run. As soon as the topic was brought up, it seemed that the whole live stream instantly entered into a nostalgic theme. They all talked about their childhood villages. Cutest husky, my village has been greatly improved. There are many small factories built. It's developed, but I can't see the scene in my childhood memory anymore. I can't see the blue sky anymore. The fields are so barren that weeds are growing. Jiang Pingji sat in the carriage with one hand on the table. She was bored and looked at the scenery outside or read the comments to kill time. The coachman drove the carriage skillfully and tried his best to reduce the vibration so that the nobles in the carriage would not feel uncomfortable. Su Ku, who was outside, said in a low voice, Lang Jun, we've arrived. Jiang Pingji came back to her senses and got out of the carriage. She avoided Su Ku's attempt to help her up and jumped down. For convenience, she had changed out of the fluttering, wide-sleeved cloak and replaced it with a simple and refined brown dress. To be honest, she had had enough of wearing the complicated, anti-human, open-crotch dress. What's the use of tightly wrapped clothes? There was still air underneath. Let's go. Jiang Pingji said with a smile and led the way forward. The children who were playing saw the strangers coming and ran back, laughing. The audience in the live streaming room felt that the village scene was familiar and warm, but it was a new experience for Jiang Pingji, who was used to cold cities and advanced machinery. It was as if her cold and lonely heart was warmed by the scene. They were dressed very simply. Jiang Pingji wore the brown dress that commoners often wore, which made her look very low-key. Fortunately, the carriage had the emblem of the Lus on it. Although the head of the village had never seen Jiang Pingji before, he knew that the person in the carriage must be from the main family. When he learned that the young man in brown was the second Lang Jun of the Lus, he was so scared that he did not dare to speak. Relax. I'm just here to see the people who were sent to the village a few days ago. Did any of them try to escape these days? After asking the head of the village, Jiang Pingji looked at Su Ku, who looked embarrassed. Even if Lu Shi had not sent people to stop them, Su Ku would not have been able to escape from the boundaries of the farm. Jiang Pingji had also sent people to keep an eye on him. The head of the village knelt down obediently and answered with fear. He was afraid that he would offend the Lang Jun and bring trouble to the village. Dongqing seemed to be peaceful, but corrupt officials were running rampant. The gentry in the villages exploited the people. How could the commoners live a peaceful life? Too many people lived in misery. Not only did they have to bear heavy taxes, but they also had to face bandits. In comparison, the tenants in the farm lived a very comfortable life. Everyone in the surrounding villages was envious of them. The main family was kind and had the advantage of money. The bandits did not dare to come and take advantage of them. Most of the tenants lived a happy life. If they did not serve the guests well and angered the Lang Jun of the main family, they would have a hard time in the future. Except for Su Ku, who was taken away, the rest of the people who were sent to the village were arranged to stay in the farm. Because they did not have specific instructions, they did not dare to make decisions. They only sent a few farmers to keep an eye on them in case any of them escaped. It's good that they did not escape. Go and get those people here. Jiang Pingji said to the head of the village and then turned to Su Ku. You will have to work hard for the next few days. Stay in the farm for some time and keep an eye on them for training. When everything is on the right track, you will be assigned to someone you can trust. I will allow you to borrow some books from the study of the Lu's house while you are staying in the farm. In case you fall behind in your studies. Work and study were two different things. Su-ku was still young, so he had to focus on his studies. He could not neglect one thing. A subordinate who could not improve himself at any time was not a good subordinate. Although she did not show it, Jiang Pingji was treating Su-ku like an assistant in the internal affairs of the army in her previous life. Chapter 81. The internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. Jiang Pingji was very clear about her position, be it in her previous or current life. She used to be the leader of the whole army, the core pillar of the army, the belief of all the soldiers, and the confidence of the whole army. Ahem, in layman's terms, she was the mascot in times of peace and the alpha wolf in times of war. She was in charge of the war, and the internal affairs and diplomatic contacts of the army were handed over to her assistants. She was a slacker in one of the subjects. War was her home field, and she was not good at other things. She could not blindly command others, could she? Now that she had given Su-ku the authority to manage the internal affairs and personnel, she naturally would not command others in this area. If Su-ku could not control the situation, it would not be too late for her to intervene. Jiang Pingji and Su-ku formulated a detailed training process and stages based on the principle of making full use of the resources and progressing step by step. The initial training period was not long, and the tasks were not heavy. They were given enough time to adapt. After they had fully adapted, the intensity of the training and other activities would be gradually increased. When they were not training, they would cultivate the fields, work in the fields, or help the other tenants of the farm. In order to stimulate the motivation of the training, they were divided into groups of 5, and each group would select a corporal. The corporal would receive more than half of the monthly allowance than the others. Of course, the corporal was not fixed. There would be a selection every month, and the best performance would win. There was also a competition between the groups, and the group with the best performance would receive an extra half of the monthly allowance. There were rewards and punishments, and the punishments were more severe than the rewards. There was a monthly examination, and the worst performance would be deducted 10% of the monthly allowance, and the training tasks for the next half-month would be 10% more than the others. The group with the worst overall performance would be deducted 10% of the monthly allowance, and the training tasks for the next half-month would be 10% more than the others. In addition, if an ordinary person made a mistake or caused trouble, the whole group would be punished. If the corporal deliberately caused trouble, the whole group would be punished. These few rules seemed simple, but in fact, they formed a relationship of supervision and restraint between the corporals, and the corporals. The corporals enjoyed more benefits, but they also had to bear more responsibilities. They shared weal and woe with each other. They seemed independent, but in fact, they were one. Jiang Pingji and Su-ku had a detailed discussion about the amount of silver each person would receive each month. After consulting various sources, they finally decided on the amount. Not long after, the head of the village came over with a group of people. Looking at those people's spirit and appearance, they were indeed better than when they were in the broker house. I bought you from the broker house for a reason, not to let you come here to enjoy life. I'll cut to the chase. No matter what you do in the future, you'll have to listen to Su-ku's orders. If anyone tries to cause trouble, don't blame me for being ruthless. Su-ku. Many of the servants had heard of this name and knew who Su-ku was. Hearing this name, some of the bolder ones couldn't help but raise their heads slightly. They found that Su-ku, who was originally just like them, or even more down and out than they were, was now dressed appropriately. His appearance was also more plump than a few days ago, and his spirit was not the same as before. For a moment, many people felt jealous and envious. However, before they could think further, Jiang Pingji's words were like a basin of cold water splashing over their faces. It was a very small scene, but Suku's hands were slightly trembling with excitement, and his expression was hidden in the shadows. I'm not a ruthless master. If you're dissatisfied, you can say it. If it's reasonable, I'll listen. If it's unreasonable, then shut up. Jiang Pingji glanced at everyone with indifference that made people dare not look directly at her. She gave Suku a wink, and the young man understood and went forward to explain the training in detail. Hearing that they could eat and wear warm clothes every day, and they could get extra monthly silver, those people were all happy. Nowadays, it was not easy to survive in this world. There were natural and man-made disasters that forced people to have no way to live. Heijin County was still prosperous, but some other poor counties were full of starvation and bandits. In some serious places, 9 out of 10 houses were even empty. After they were bought, they found that Suku was gone the next day. They were worried for many days, for they were afraid of being implicated by Suku. Now that the dust had settled, Suku, who they thought had been beaten to death, was standing in front of them. The fierce master in their imagination was actually kind and gentle. For a moment, many people breathed a sigh of relief. As for the training, it was all physical work, so it should not be too tiring. Jiang Pingji saw that they were relieved. She smiled and said coldly, "The Lus don't raise useless people, and the monthly silver is not that easy to get. I didn't buy all of you just to guard the house, and it's not something that can be dismissed with just a few superficial tricks." The young man's voice was mostly immature, but when they heard Jiang Pingji's words, they felt that the air was stagnant and cold. Their backs were covered in cold sweat, and a chill spread from the soles of their feet to their brains. Unspeakable fear lingered in their hearts. Although Heijin County is prosperous, there are also mountain bandits in the nearby mountains. They are evil bandits who rob houses, and they are the enemies you'll have to deal with after your training. You can train carelessly and not take it to heart, and then use this kind of training results to fool me. However, in the future, when you meet those vicious bandits, they will not be merciful because of this and let you live. As soon as Jiang Pingji said that, Suko could not help but raise his head to look at her. He was a little surprised. That was not what they had agreed on beforehand. However, the thin, immature boy with his hands behind his back was particularly dazzling under the sun. Not only was Suko obsessed with the scene, but there were also fangirls in the streaming room who kept sending gifts. Tudu Feicho, the streamer is so handsome that I can't close my legs QWQ. Jindois Xianyu is poisonous in the chrysanthemum, I really want to be pressed on the ground by the streamer. Ah, use strength. Yeah. Yeah. Die. Jinginiang, upstairs, if you continue like this, you will lead the children astray. The system laughed so hard that its eyes could not be seen. The depression it had been feeling for the past few days had all dissipated. It didn't matter if the streamer's style was strange. Anyway, the audience was generous, and the streaming was getting better and better. Ignoring the panicked expressions of the crowd, Jiang Pingji smiled coldly. The Lu family does not raise useless people, and I, Lu Shi, do not need a group of useless people to be an eyesore in front of me. I will give you 3 months. When the time comes, the bandits will die, or you will die. It is all up to you. A wolf that had not seen blood might be weaker than a lamb that had seen blood. Jiang Pingji wanted to train a group of bloodthirsty tigers and wolves, not a group of sheep that could only perform acrobatics. Chapter 82. Jiang Pingji was shorter than everyone there, but her aura easily crushed everyone. Su Kuk stared at her. In a trance, he saw a fierce tiger with a strong body. Blood and flesh hung from the corners of its mouth. Its muscles were tense, ready to strike, and it was staring at its prey. Her eyes were fierce and cold. Being stared at by her, it was as if he was already destined to die. When he came back to his senses, the other party was still a young man bathed in sunlight. His black hair reflected the light, and there was a halo around him. After a while, although everyone was trembling in fear and their teeth were chattering, no one had the courage to raise any objections. The corners of Jiang Pingji's lips curled into a cold smile. She squinted her eyes, revealing her slender and long eyes. A trace of mischievousness and interest flashed across her eyes. Since there are no objections, let's begin. She raised her hand and threw the sandalwood fan in Su Ke's direction. Su Ke instinctively reached out to catch it. The familiar fragrance on the fan made his whole body tremble. He subconsciously thought of Lu Shi's cold and venomous eyes that night. It couldn't be helped, he had been traumatized. No, now was not the time to be afraid. His Lang Jun had said to start. What start? Was this part of the process set up at the beginning? Before the confused Su Ke could figure out what start meant, Jiang Pingji's next words almost scared him half to death. Jiang Pingji said leisurely. Su Ke's heart skipped a beat. I will choose the first batch of sergeants. I will be fair and impartial. She continued, I know that some of you are already thinking of retreating, afraid that you will lose your life in the hands of a ruthless bandit. However, the indenture that concerns your lives is in my hands, so you don't dare to act rashly. Now, I will give you a chance. Whoever defeats me, I will release their indenture, return their freedom, and give them a year's worth of silver. After a long time, Su Ke's deepest impression of Jiang Pingji would be the image of her curling her thin lips and shining eyes under the afternoon sun. Come at me one by one, or all at once. You don't have to be restrained. Life and death are up to fate. It's all up to the will of heaven. As soon as she said that, the crowd became restless. They didn't expect Jiang Pingji to be so arrogant. They were all children of poor families. They had been working in the fields since they were young, so they were naturally strong. Even though Jiang Pingji was the son of the noble first wife of the Lu family, and she might have trained with a martial arts master to strengthen her body, but she was thin and weak. She looked like a chicken without much meat. No matter how you looked at it, she couldn't be compared to them, could she? If he won against her, he would be able to get back the indenture and even get a year's worth of silver. Was there really such a good thing? Everyone looked at each other in dismay, their steps hesitating. No one dared to take the lead, fearing that this was just a trap to test them. Su Ke was anxious. He wanted to pull Jiang Pingji back, but he was afraid of offending her. If he did nothing, what would he do if she was injured by those reckless men? To be more serious, what if he was beaten to death by random punches? His heart was restless, as if there was a small tongue of fire licking his heart, causing him to feel even more anxious and tormented. However, in the next moment, he inadvertently saw the smile on the corner of her lips. Her eyes revealed a look of anticipation. Su Ke suddenly stopped in his tracks. He couldn't help but think of that day at the gathering. Jiang Pingji had also teased the crowd in the same way. There was a look of disdain in the depths of her eyes. That was a signal, she didn't take her opponent seriously at all. Thus, he silently stopped. The atmosphere became more and more stagnant. Everyone felt as if there was a layer of seemingly thin, but in fact, extremely heavy stone pressing down on their hearts. It made them inexplicably nervous. Their breathing was heavy and hurried, and their backs were sweating profusely. It was as if they were bearing a weight that they couldn't bear. None of you dare. Jiang Pingji spoke appropriately. She picked a sensitive time when the pressure in everyone's hearts had reached its limit. As soon as she finished speaking, an adult man with slightly red eyes dashed out of the crowd. He was the most muscular of all the servants, and he was also the strongest. He waved a fist that was as large as a boulder and directly attacked Jiang Pingji's face, bringing with it a strong gust of wind. Finally, there's someone with guts. Jiang Pingji laughed softly. She didn't care about the fist at all. The head of the manor was already so scared that his chest was beating wildly. He almost couldn't keep up with the rhythm of his breathing. Suko couldn't bear to look at it, so he tilted his head to avoid eye contact. Everyone in the streaming room subconsciously held their breath and clenched their fists slightly. At that moment, some people were complaining about why the streaming screen was so high definition. It made them feel as if the fist would break through the screen and directly hit their faces. Some of the more timid ones were even mentally prepared for the streamer to be splattered with blood on the spot. Many streamers liked to do things that courted death in order to attract popularity. They didn't expect Jiang Pingji to follow in their footsteps. Among the people present, the ones who were least worried were the minority of the streaming audience who had seen Jiang Pingji's valiant fighting ability. While everyone else was trembling with fear, they were the only ones who were excited and opened their eyes wide, afraid that they would miss any exciting moment. Good move. Faced with the menacing fist, Jiang Pingji didn't dodge. Instead, she took a step forward and directly met the opponent head-on. She used her side palm to block the opponent's wrist and offset most of the force. Then she used her palm to shake off the opponent's wrist. She opened her palm wide and grabbed the opponent's arm. She turned around and used the opponent's strength to fight back. Her movements were simple, but she used the force to the extreme. After all, these were the servants who had to be trained. She couldn't just punch them until they were unconscious. Who would train them if they were lying on the mattresses moaning and moaning? Therefore, Jiang Pingji only wanted to teach them a little lesson. She just needed to beat them until they were completely convinced. The seventh core was bellicose. Not only was their slogan "cause trouble," but they also had some bad habits that outsiders thought were very rude. Every year, 99% of the new recruits had to go through the recruit baptism. To put it bluntly, it was to go against the veterans and then be ruthlessly beaten up. Young people were always hot-tempered. They had to be beaten up. Otherwise, it would be difficult to discipline them in the future. Similarly, these servants each had their own thoughts. They might not take training seriously in the future, so they deserved to be beaten up. Instead of worrying about this problem in the future, it was better to beat them up now. For Jiang Pingji, there was nothing in this world that couldn't be solved with a good beating. If there was, she would beat them up again. The servant who was the first to act was like a signal. It made the hesitation in the hearts of the others dissipate instantly. Taking advantage of their momentary courage, they pounced on Jiang Pingji. They had the advantage in numbers. Were they afraid that they couldn't beat a young and weak Lang Jun from an aristocratic family? They didn't ask for anything else. They didn't want to beat her to death. After all, if they killed her, they would be buried with her. They only wanted to win against Jiang Pingji. As long as they won, she had made a promise in front of everyone. They dared not go back on their words for the sake of their pride. Chapter 83. The internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. More than a dozen people couldn't even touch the hem of Jiang Pingji's clothes, let alone cause her any trouble. They had no combat discipline, no sense of cooperation, and no tactics to speak of. They only knew how to rush around like headless flies. Not only could they not exert the strength of 1 + 1 = 2, but they were also holding each other back. Jiang Pingji had no difficulty in dealing with them. Corpses were constantly being thrown to the ground with dull thuds. Suko opened his eyes slightly and saw Jiang Pingji in a plain brown robe strolling among the crowd. Her movements were simple, but she had the demeanor of a master. "I've never seen anyone weaker than you. You want to suppress bandits. Why don't you go buy an embroidery brush and stay in the house to learn how to do needlework? With this kind of ability, if I take you to suppress bandits, you won't even be enough to kill one person. Jiang Pingji had perfect control of her strength. She didn't injure or cripple them. However, they wouldn't be able to stand up and fight with her for a while. His venomous tongue was unleashed, stomping on wherever it hurt. The men were red in the face, as if living in the world was a waste of food, and committing suicide out of shame would pollute the land. Look at you. You're all so weak. Your legs are like noodles. You can't even stand straight. You'll fall if you stumble. You'll lie on the ground and wail for a long time. Did you not eat enough during the day? Or did you lose your body on a woman at night? Or did you sleep too much in bed? Jiang Pingji sarcastically said. She never paid attention to her limits, so she inadvertently used dirty words. Su Ku, a young boy, blushed. He looked at Jiang Pingji as if he was looking at a monster. How could such vulgar words come out of the mouth of a noble Lang Jun who was raised in a noble family? Jiang Pingji acted as if nothing had happened to Su Ku. She didn't think what she said was wrong. Was this standard vulgar, dirty, and violent? Then what about the fact that she had drunk alcohol and won the championship of the Dirty Stories competition? She tried to use elegant words to express herself. The system, which had been happy a moment ago, was now paralyzed on the sofa and couldn't take care of itself. With such a host, it was already a salted fish. The bystanders were dumbstruck, but there was a group of people who were so excited that they couldn't stop. Notifications flooded the screen, flipping page after page. Domineering President, rewarded 1314 kidney apples. Viewer, come and hit me if you're not convinced, rewarded 11 sets of 520 blue and white side items. Viewer, stupid network card crippled, rewarded 99 blue enchantresses. The most eye-catching thing was a huge firework that exploded on the virtual screen. The cool special effects almost occupied the entire screen. Viewer, so poor that only have money left, tipped a luxurious private yacht. Viewer, so poor that only have money left, tipped a luxurious private yacht. Viewer, so poor that only have money left, tipped a luxurious private yacht. The same announcement was repeated 9 times. The entire live broadcast room was silent for a second before it exploded. Tutu Fecho, wow, he's really a nouveau riche. He's so poor that he only has money left. 9 luxury private yachts. Cafeteria Daffin Auntie, nouveau riche, please hang me wherever you point me. Penguin Girl, although there are very few people in our live broadcast room, there are many people who are stupid and rich _ smiley face 3 angle _ a luxurious private yacht was equivalent to 1,000 popularity points, which required 1,000 streaming coins. If converted to the currency of their dimension, it would be 1,000 renminbi. The nouveau riche rewarded 9 yachts in a row, which meant that he didn't even blink and directly threw in 9,000. For other popular live broadcast rooms, this bit of reward was nothing, but for this new live broadcast room, it was a rare large amount. Jiang Pingji was stunned. Looking at the points of popularity in her account, she secretly raised her eyebrows. She still didn't show her emotions. So poor that only have money left, the streamer is great. Reward her. Look, the nouveau riche was so indifferent. However, Jiang Pingji laughed coldly in her heart and threw it to the back of her head. There was no other reason. When the special firework reward filled the entire screen, the system issued a live broadcast task backstage. A song of colorful clothes dancing, the beauty's voice spread everywhere. Today, there is a viewer poor that only have money left, who wishes for the streamer to dance to a song. The dance is moving and the duration is not less than 10 minutes. Task reward, 9 luxurious private helicopters. A. Accept. B. Consider rejecting. The prices of the luxurious private helicopters and the luxurious private yachts were the same. They were virtual reward currency in the live broadcast room. In other words, if Jiang Pingji was willing to accept the task and dance in front of the live broadcast audience for 10 minutes to satisfy the nouveau riche and give a high evaluation, she could receive another 9,000 points of reward. After deducting the system's bonus, she could still get half of it. She didn't expect that before she could choose the semi-interactive mode or the fully interactive mode, the nouveau riche had already seriously studied the rules of the live broadcast room and issued a live broadcast task with a high reward. This was unique to the designated live broadcast mode. Before the system could scream in excitement, Jiang Pingji had already chosen to reject the task. The reward stored in the system was instantly refunded when the nouveau riche issued the task. Thus, its scream was like a duck that had been strangled by its neck. It stopped abruptly. It was hilarious. The system wailed, "Host, that's a total of 9,000 points of popularity. You can get it just by dancing." Jiang Pingji sternly stopped it. "Shut up." At the same time, a bullet screen notification was posted in her mind. Host V, thank you for the love and enthusiasm of the audience, but the live broadcast room refuses to accept any content of the designated live broadcast mode. It's a matter of principle and has nothing to do with anything else. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Jiang Pingji briefly explained the voting rules for the semi-interactive mode and the fully interactive mode. Although the live broadcast without a clear theme was very interesting, it also lacked a sense of anticipation. After a long time, people would get tired. Moreover, there was no guarantee that interesting things would happen every time the live broadcast was free. Sometimes she felt that her days were boring and moldy, not to mention the audience sitting in front of the screen watching the live broadcast. The novelty of the live broadcast room could maintain the curiosity in their hearts, but it could not sustain their passion. Although Jiang Pingji was expressionless and there was no flaw in her eyes or expression, Su Ku, who was beside her, sensitively noticed that his Langjuan's good mood was inexplicably covered with a layer of dense fog. She seemed to be extremely unhappy. Could it be that Langjun was extremely disappointed in the people lying on the ground? Su Ku could not help but think more, but before he could figure it out, Jiang Pingji had already stepped forward and taken away the sandalwood fan that he was keeping. You make arrangements for these people. We will go back to the mansion to discuss this at night. We will officially start training tomorrow. If they are still so useless, there is no need to keep them and waste food. Jiang Pingji's face was cold and stern, as if she was suppressing some kind of emotion. It made people subconsciously lower their heads, not daring to make a sound. Chapter 84. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. For some unknown reason, Lu Shi trusted and indulged his daughter. Apart from her studies, he rarely interfered with anything else. However, he still wanted to know the details. He was afraid that she would be taken advantage of. Obviously, Lu Shi's worry was unnecessary. How could Jiang Pingji be taken advantage of? Su Ku was a busy man. First, he made arrangements for the servants in the farm. Then, he came back and had a heart-to-heart talk with Jiang Pingji. Before he could eat a hot meal, he was called over by Lu Shi, the head of the family. Because of the fear, Su Ku did not hide the details. He was eloquent, and his narration was clear. Lu Shi sat at the head of the table and listened with his eyes closed. He seemed to be enjoying it. Behind the screen, Madame Hu smiled. Erlang has really made a name for himself. Cousin can feel more at ease now. His daughter was praised, but as the head of the household, he could not be too proud. He could not hide his smile, but he still had to be humble. However, when Su Ku told her about how Jiang Pingji had provoked many of the reservists and said that she would send them to exterminate bandits after the training, Madame Hu was so shocked that she almost threw the snack back onto the plate. Lu Shi opened his eyes abruptly, and there was a hint of astonishment in his eyes. Madame Hu could not care less about her elegance. She said sternly, "A gentleman does not stand under a collapsing wall." How could Erlang be so impulsive? In this regard, Lu Shi did not say anything. He only had a look of realization on his face that others could not understand. No one knew what he was thinking. Madame Hu's angry voice did not reach his ears. He felt like he was floating, as if he was in another dimension. After a long time, he gathered his thoughts. His face was pale. "All right, Lanting is no longer a 3-year-old. You know what you're doing." Lu Shi interrupted Madame Hu's order to stop Zhang Pingji. There was tiredness and an indescribable sharpness between his brows. Maybe this is fate. He went straight back to the main courtyard. The candlelight in the corridor flickered and flickered, elongating his shadow. Sitting in front of a few tables, Lu Shi spread out a great universal geographical map of Dongqing. A place was clearly marked on it. It was Hu County, which Lu Shi had once governed. He stared at Hu County for an hour, clenching his fists so tightly that a few crescent moon marks were left on his palms. After a long time, he said to the maidservant waiting outside the room, "Go and invite Lanting here." In ancient times, people worked at sunrise and rested at sunset. Zhang Pingji was ready to go to bed with the help of her maids. "Let's go. Don't let father wait too long." She suddenly received a message from Lu Shi. She frowned and got up to take the warm and heavy cloak from Takshu. She put it on. She didn't know if it was because Lu Shi had returned, or if it was because of the revival of spring, which had injected vitality into the desolate Lu mansion. The landscape in the courtyard was a lot more luxuriant than when she had first arrived. It was just that the moon was bright and the stars were sparse. The light was dim, and the scenery was flickering. It was rather strange. When she reached the main courtyard, she bowed to Lu Shi. He waved at her and said gently, "Lanting, come forward." She took a few steps forward and sat down beside the table. She found her father staring at a great universal geographical map of Dongqing. Although it was a great universal geographical map, it was actually quite simple. Not to mention the rivers and mountains, even the size of the map was drawn in a mess. "Lanting, do you know where the county I was in was?" Lu Shi pushed the lamp on the table toward Zhang Pingji so that she could see more clearly. "I've been away from Hejian for the past few years. I've wondered if Lanting has any resentment. But I had no choice but to temporarily leave my homeland and my children." Zhang Pingji looked up at him suspiciously. She didn't understand why Lu Shi suddenly brought up this topic. "Father, you were in this place. It's called Hu County, but it's as big as a prefecture." Zhang Pingji answered the first question and avoided the second one. After all, she was not Lu Lanting. She was in no position to answer, and she couldn't give an answer. Lu Shi caressed the Hu County on the great universal geographical map with his fair fingertips. "Yes, Hu County. Before I took office, it was a famous barren land in Dongqing. The government sent many high-ranking officials there, but they all died halfway or in office. It was a place of no return. It was not a bad thing to say that Hu County was barren. Since the end of the Xia dynasty, it had been a hard bone to chew. The land was vast, but it was overgrown with weeds. There had been a continuous drought for 10 years without a single drop of rain, which made it difficult for every household to survive. To survive, every able-bodied man in every household became roving bandits. They looted everywhere and sold their children. Those who had the means to escape from Hu County early. Even if they were worse off than pigs or dogs, it was better than being tortured in the hell that was Hu County. Not only that, but the disaster relief silver and food distributed by the court were exploited and bullied by the gentry. When they reached the hands of the people, they were left with rice mixed with 99% soil. It was the same every year. The gentry ran amok, the officials protected each other, and the roving bandits ran rampant. After the fall of the Xia dynasty, Dongqing took over the Hardbone. Before Lu Shi, there was no lack of righteous officials who wanted to govern, but there was no exception. They all died. As a result, Lu Shi became the longest-serving county chief in Hu County. He was even worshipped by the local people as a god. What happened to you, father? Why were you sent to such a dangerous place? Jiang Pingji frowned. Hu County was notorious. Any young man who knew his place would not go to such a place to be an official. Wasn't that courting death? The Lu family was not considered the top family in Dongqing, but not everyone could look down on them. They should have connections in the bureaucracy. Lu Shi's answer was beyond Jiang Pingji's expectation. I was willing to go to the edge of death to survive. Willing. He was willing to die. Or could it be that Lu Shi was certain that he would survive in Hu County? No, he was willing to go to the edge of death to survive. Was there really someone who wanted to kill Lu Shi? To others, Hu County is a place where death is certain. But to me, it is a blessed land that contains a sliver of hope. Lu Shi sighed with emotion. In his mind, he was dressed in sackcloth. He was grief-stricken as he hurried on his way with Amin's memorial tablet. At that time, he had lost his son twice. Then, his beloved wife was seriously ill. He was getting weaker day by day. There were all kinds of murderous intents staring at the small Lu residence. He was the only child left in his arms. He was at a loss. When he was at his most depressed, he even wanted to die. But Amin was right. Lanting was still alive. His enemy was still alive. He could not die yet. He only had a glimmer of hope when he went to Hu County. Chapter 85. Jiang Pingji was suspicious of the inexplicable test. She glanced at Lu Shi's face and then closed her eyes. It seemed like this cheap father of hers was hiding more secrets than she had imagined. But she was not a fool. Lu Shi's actions were not as simple as a test. It was more like he was trying to prove something. I've studied Hu Commandery in detail as well. If you want to stay alive, it's not difficult. It was her father's place after all. Although the original Lu Lanting did not have much of an impression of her father, she was full of admiration for him. She desperately wanted to know everything about him, so there were many books and information about Hu County in her study. Hu County is a place where bandits are rampant. The gentry officials collude with each other and exploit the people. That's why they hate the officials sent by the court. Because of the special circumstances, Hu County's officials are hereditary. Sons inherit their father's position. It's almost like a country within a country. Jiang Pingji had always been violent. She would not complicate things if she could. It was very simple to stay alive and go to Hu County. Lu Shi's eyes shone. The confusion and hesitation on his face seemed to have dissipated. How is it not difficult? Bring 300 guards and 10 carts of money and grain. Don't rush to take up your post. Go and suppress the bandits first. Jiang Pingji said with a smile. Her eyes reflected the candlelight and shone brightly. One could not help but indulge in her confidence. The people of Hu County are tough. How can they be convinced by a letter from the imperial court? Only a strong army and force can intimidate the people. Only then can they not act rashly. Powerful soldiers have always been forged in blood. First, we will use the small group of bandits to test the waters. If they sincerely pledge allegiance to us, we can recruit them. If they resist, we will kill them without mercy. If necessary, we will kill them all. This is the name of a fierce army. They were bandits. No matter how ruthless they were, no one would be able to find fault with them. This seemingly nonsensical move was actually for the sake of secretly recruiting strong and useful people to expand his own strength. The second branch of the Lu family had a large business and plenty of money and food. It was enough for Lu Shi to play like this for a year or two. The squires and officials who tried to sharpen their knives, collude with the roving bandits, and assassinate him were all so scared that they did not dare to make a sound. They did not even dare to move. However, in order to avoid being suspected by the court, we can order some of the subdued roving bandits to sneak into the forest in disguise and continue to be his roving bandits. They can secretly pay attention to the movements of all parties, and they can also monitor the movements of the squires and officials. In short, the entire Hu County should be gradually devoured. Jiang Pingji's thoughts had not been thought through. It was just her first reaction. After fighting for so many years, it had become an instinct. They prioritized using force to solve problems. Hu Commandery was a tough nut to crack. If they weren't ruthless, they wouldn't be able to subdue them. Although the second branch of the Lu family was rich, they could not fully support the military. Therefore, it was a good way to save money by feeding on the enemy. Lu Shi's eyes grew brighter as Jiang Pingji spoke slowly. She pretended not to see it and lowered her eyes. Hu Commandery is so poor because of two reasons: man-made disasters and natural disasters. Man-made disasters can be solved, but natural disasters are not. Lu Shi seemed to have let go of something. He smiled and asked, "But Lanting, you seem to have a plan." "I have observed that one of the reasons why Hu Commandery is so poor is because of the drought. Most of the fields are dry and crops cannot grow." Jiang Pingji gestured to Hu Commandery on the great universal geographical map. However, Hu Commandery is a land of flowing water. Jiang Pingji had carefully read through the information Lu Lanting had collected. The girl seemed to be obsessed with becoming a man like her father. But the problem of Hu Commandery was right in front of her, and she could not figure it out. She did not know where to start. It was not a difficult problem for Jiang Pingji. As a genetic warrior, she had to adapt to different environments. She had to learn everything related to combat. Who knew, she might be able to survive one day. She had even been trained to survive in the wilderness. She had been thrown into the abyss of death unarmed. There were 1,000 people who had participated in the training, but she was the only one who had survived. It was not a suitable place for humans to live. Humans needed food, air, and water. Apart from the general knowledge she had learned from books, the rest of her knowledge was accumulated through life and death struggles. Combined with the culture and customs of Hu Commandery, there were many descriptions of mountains and veins. She found some clues. Of course, underground water cannot alleviate the drought in Hu Commandery. Jiang Pingji's finger moved to a large river near Hu Commandery. It was known as the Mother River of Dongqing, but the river's embankment had collapsed all year round. Hu Commandery lacked water, but some places had so much water that people could drown. It was hard to say which was more fatal, flood or drought. It was a choice between dying of thirst or drowning. No matter which one was chosen, they would die. It was just that the method of death was different. The people born in Dongqing were unlucky. They did not have a single moment of peace in the whole year. First, dig underground water. After the disaster is alleviated, gather the people and use manpower to divert the water from the branch into the river in Hu Commandery. The main river could not be moved easily. If there was another flood and the river erupted, Lu Shi would be the one to blame. But it was not a problem to divert the water from the branch. It could reduce the work and shorten the time. Moreover, the branch was closer to Hu Commandery. Lu Shi smiled and asked, "This plan is feasible, but how can the people bear the burden of corvée labor? Corvée labor was, to put it bluntly, unpaid manual labor. It was heavy and often resulted in murder cases. Moreover, it was difficult to motivate the people. Jiang Pingji thought about it and said, "What's so difficult about it? Promise the people some compensation and that they will be responsible for 3 meals of coarse grain. Also, promise that when the project is completed and the land is reclaimed, the government will provide farming tools and cattle. Every household will be able to reduce or exempt their taxes." With compensation, how could the people's enthusiasm be the same as free labor? Monetary compensation was the motivation and direction to move forward. Hu Commandery was a strange place. Dongqing had little control over it and all the laws were just lip service. If Lu Shi could settle down in Hu Commandery, it would be easy for him to reduce or even exempt taxes for a few years. It was a good deal to use the court's order to do him a favor. The people's reputation would belong to him. Lu Shi asked, "Such a huge project will require an uncountable amount of money. Where will the money come from? What's more, corvée labor has its own rules. If we really implement it, not only will we have to face the pressure of not having enough money, but we may also be impeached." Chapter 86. Jiang Pingji smiled faintly. She was cunning and said, "The officials love the people like they are their own children. Why can't they pay for it? The law doesn't punish the masses. The imperial court can't save the people, so why can't the people in Hu County save themselves? To put it bluntly, it was robbing the rich to help the poor. Opportunities are created by people. You'll only suffer if you stick to the rules." Her eyes flashed with interest. Those rural gentry clans that have been entrenched in Hu County for hundreds of years are all filthy rich. How can good people like them be absent when it comes to benefiting the people? Aren't pigs fattened so that they can be slaughtered and eaten during the new year? They could always get something out of slaughtering them. As for how to make those Pai Shio spit out the money and rice, it's simple. Hu County does suffer from drought every year, but the root cause of the current situation is man-made. The imperial court provides relief money every year and reduces taxes every year, but what's the result? Natural disasters were scary, but the people's hearts were more frightening when they fought among themselves. They could resist natural disasters if they were united, but the man-made disaster was the reason why Hu County went from a chaotic and impoverished Xia dynasty to Dongqing. Let's not talk about this. Just look at the relief money allocated every year from the previous dynasty to Dongqing. It's definitely a huge loophole that can't be filled. Who ate it? Is there still any doubt? If those people don't want to spit out what they ate, we can only resort to extreme measures. Whether it's falsifying accounts or pretending to be bandits, exterminating the family and confiscating the property, there must be a suitable method. The former method could at least save their lives, but the latter would be exterminated. There's nothing in this world that can't be solved with a knife. If there is, I'll do it again. Jiang Pingji squinted her eyes as she spoke. Her lips curled into a bloodthirsty smile, which was indescribably beautiful. It would be best if there was evidence, but if there was no evidence, she could only fabricate it. Extraordinary times called for extraordinary actions. Even a gentleman couldn't rigidly adhere to the rigid rules. If it didn't work, she could publicize it to the people. Lu Shi didn't have to do anything. The seething resentment would drive people to their deaths. To put it bluntly, if he wanted to govern Hu County well, he couldn't rely on being a gentleman. He wanted to be as much of a hooligan as he could be. If they were evil, he needed to be even more evil than them. If they didn't agree with him, they would start fighting and killing. However, to achieve this, the public must have a high reputation, and they must have a military force that the officials and gentry are afraid of. Otherwise, it will be extremely easy to die on the spot. What Jiang Pingji said was built on the foundation of absolute military force. If Lu Shi wanted to heal Hu County, he would inevitably anger the local tyrants and harm their interests. Men die for wealth, and birds die for food. It was extremely normal for him to kill Lu Shi for his own benefit. It's not difficult to stay alive. Establishing a firm foothold and governing Hu County complement each other. Jiang Pingji's mouth was dry after saying so much. She secretly licked her dry lips with her tongue. Her eyes were bright and spirited. What did father do back then? Lu Shi smiled shyly. Just like my son. In other words, he had used the methods that Lu Lanting had used, but he was not as ruthless and decisive as she was. The methods he had used against the local gentry in Hu County seemed ruthless, and they had even given him the title of King of Hell behind his back. However, compared to Lu Lanting, his methods were tame and kind. No matter how ruthless Lu Shi was, he had at least let the gentry survive. Lu Lanting, on the other hand, had surrounded the residence of the gentry. She had killed every living thing in the residence. Not even a bird or a chicken was spared. Almost all the gentry in Hu County, except for those who had defected early on, had been killed by her. Lu Shi looked at Jiang Pingji with a complicated expression. Even though she did not look murderous and her eyes were clear, he was sure that she was not joking. Thinking of this, Lu Shi muttered, "But Lanting, you've forgotten something very important." Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows. Her plan had been improvised, so it was normal for it to have loopholes. She had always been conceited, so when she heard that Lu Shi's plan would not work, she became interested. "Father, please advise me." Lu Shi did not speak. He wrote 2 words on the table with his index finger. Jiang Pingji's face darkened. He said, "Your plan is feasible, but have you ever thought that you will offend all the gentry clans by doing this? In today's era, insulting the emperor in public was worse than insulting the aristocratic families. The gentry clans were powerful. Jiang Pingji's plan could solve the problem in Hu County, but what should he do next? Put himself in a hostile position with all the gentry clans. What's more, most of the talented people nowadays come from the aristocratic families. Lu Shi stopped here and changed the topic. It's rare to see a few people from poor families. If we do as you say, have you ever thought about the consequences of being ostracized by them? In today's era, most of the resources were given to the gentry clans. They had a lot of money and knowledge, and the ratio of talents they nurtured was much higher than that of ordinary people. Innate talent was important, but so was the environment and education. If she offended all the gentry clans according to her plan, who would be willing to work for her if she rebelled in the future? Jiang Pingji's face darkened. She raised her head and looked at Lu Shi. There seemed to be an undercurrent in her dark eyes. "So what do you think we should do, father?" Jiang Pingji asked deliberately. Lu Shi said bluntly, "We can't offend them completely. They could be offended, but they could not become irreconcilable enemies. It was important to leave some leeway for others." Jiang Pingji pursed her lips and thought for a while. In the end, she said, "It is better to get rid of future troubles than to keep them around." There was nothing that could not be solved with a knife. If there was, then another knife. It was the same no matter who came. Lu Shi looked at Jiang Pingji with a complicated expression. After a long time, he let out a long sigh and said, "Lanting, I don't care what you're thinking or what you're going to do, but you must think twice before you act. Think about yourself and your family." After all, she was the second legitimate son of the Lu family in Hejian. With his reminder, Jiang Pingji reacted and responded, "I understand." Lu Shi did not dare to think about whether or not Jiang Pingji had really listened to him. Chapter 87. Forget it. Let's not talk about such a depressing matter. Lu Shi cut the conversation short. He did not want the father and son to get into an argument over something that did not even exist. Not to mention anything else, but his daughter's answer just now made him extremely satisfied and even proud. Emperor Chen of the Jiang dynasty was not to be underestimated. Lu Shi's expression did not change, but he had been thinking about it. Jiang Pingji secretly frowned and said, "Father is at home now. He should rest well. It's better not to worry too much. If that's the case, I'll listen to you." Lu Shi smiled and shook his head. "I suddenly feel like eating egg custard." Jiang Pingji said coldly, "I'm not good at cooking." In fact, Lu Lanting's current body did not even know where the kitchen was. Jiang Pingji was used to eating all kinds of nutrient solutions. She did not mind stuffing them into her mouth as long as she could eat them. Survival was the most important thing. As for the only thing that was related to cooking, it was barbecue. In that case, I'll cook for Lanting. Let's have a good drink together. Their relationship was strong. The topic was a little sensitive, and the atmosphere was tense. They needed to ease up. Lu Shi was not the only one who thought so. Jiang Pingji agreed. It was just that, drinking wine while drinking egg custard, that was really too much. Besides, Lu Lanting's body was still that of an underage girl. Was it really okay to drink? It turned out that she was thinking too much. Lu Shi said he was going to cook, but he only knew how to make egg custard because the steps were simple. As for drinking, he only knew how to make pear blossom wine. The alcohol content was so low that Jiang Pingji could drink more than 10 jars without getting drunk. After only a few cups, Lu Shi's cheeks were already tinged with a slightly tipsy red. She looked down at the wine cup and then at Lu Shi. How could he get drunk? She didn't know that because Gu Min believed that alcohol could damage the liver, Lu Shi had isolated himself from alcohol and tobacco since he was a child. Before he turned 20, he would only drink wine on his wedding night. Later on, when he socialized with officials, he would drink tea instead. Now that Gu Min was gone, he would occasionally drink a few cups. A person's tolerance for alcohol depended on both talent and training. Lu Shi didn't have the talent, nor did he train. His body wasn't in good shape, and he was exhausted by the affairs of Hu County a few years ago. Even a few cups of low-alcohol pear blossom wine would make him slightly tipsy. As the saying went, it wasn't the wine that intoxicated him, but the wine that intoxicated him. Lu Shi deliberately wanted to get drunk, and no one could stop him. After drinking a few more cups, he was already a little dizzy. His eyes were a little red from being drunk, and his eyes were a little red. He and Jiang Pingji sat on the veranda in the courtyard. Your mother loved the pear trees in the courtyard. She often took care of them. The pear wine of the Lu residence became a must-have for guests. Once upon a time, there was a swing under this tree. Your eldest brother was once in her arms, sitting on the swing and laughing happily. Even though the meaning of the pear tree was not good, Gu Min liked it. Lu Shi took advantage of the fact that he was slightly tipsy and supported his forehead with his hand. Hot tears rolled down his cheeks. He passed away when he was only 2 years old. Your mother's body was weak, and I didn't want her to have multiple pregnancies, lest it hurt her body and her mind. After that, I raised her for 4 years before I had you and your second brother. Who knew that he would drown in a pond when he was 4 years old? Ever since you were born, your mother did everything herself. She taught you not to talk to strangers, not to go to the water, and even to avoid the rocks. She was so careful, but she still fell into her trap. Lu Shi's eyes were filled with hatred and murderous intent as he spoke of the past. Lanting, this woman in the backyard looks charming, but she's even more venomous than a snake or scorpion. Her ruthlessness is breathtaking. Jiang Pingji sipped her wine as she analyzed all the information she had gathered so far. Both of Lu Lanting's brothers were killed by the woman in the backyard. Lu Shi knew who the woman was, but he couldn't take revenge on her. He was even restrained by her, so he had to be careful. Then, what was the motive for harming people? Could it be that she liked Lu Shi and killed his child out of jealousy? Jiang Pingji secretly glanced at Lu Shi. He was handsome and even middle-aged, he still looked elegant. He was even more mature and charming than the hairless kids. If it was a crime of passion, wouldn't it have been better to kill Gu Min? Gu Min, on the other hand, died of illness due to exhaustion. Lu Shi was slightly drunk. He squinted his eyes and looked very drunk. How can my daughter be like those mediocre women, practicing in a man's backyard? Jiang Pingji listened quietly. She didn't want to argue with a drunkard. She should be practicing with those men. Jiang Pingji almost choked on her wine and spat it out. Cheap father, have you forgotten your gender? Encouraging their daughter to kill her male compatriots like this, was there still any love for her compatriots? Feng Huaiyu is beautiful, but he is old-fashioned and vicious. He has beautiful wives and concubines at home, but he is not a good match. Jiang Pingji squinted at him. According to her observation, Feng Jin was just a chick. He had never taken a girl for a plunger. How could he have beautiful wives and concubines? Su Xiaoyu is beautiful, but he is rebellious and not easy to tame. He is an ingrate and not a good match. Jiang Pingji didn't understand. What did their character have to do with beauty? Shouldn't he reflect on himself when he's so obsessed with looks? She waited for Lu Shi to continue his drunken rampage, but he paused and turned his head to stare at Jiang Pingji. His eyes seemed to be shining. His movement was very sudden. If she was a timid person, she might have burst into tears and been scared out of her wits. Lu Shi was tipsy. Lanting, what do you think of Qing Yumo from Langya? Although he is a few years older than you, he is gentle and cautious. Who is Qing Yumo? She was a little suspicious, but according to the characteristics of Feng Jin and Su Ku, Qing Yumo was probably young and handsome. Not interested. Never heard of him. Then, what about Han Wenbin from Langya? She is young and beautiful, and her heart is exquisite. She carries herself with awe-inspiring righteousness. Is this cheap father trying to be a pimp? Thinking about what Lu Shi had said, Jiang Pingji couldn't help but sympathize with the youths who were targeted by him. Lu Shi sighed and said regretfully, why doesn't Lanting like it? Probably because they are not beautiful enough. Although she hadn't seen them before, they were all men. Their looks were definitely not good enough for her. She was obsessed with looks. It seemed that Lu Shi was also obsessed with looks, but she was more picky about it. The pupil had surpassed the master. Beautiful, Lu Shi tilted his head and thought for a long time. Many names floated in his muddled brain. Ever since he had his daughter, he had been thinking about marrying into the family. His daughter could not get married anyway. Not even a chance. No windows. Chapter 88. If he couldn't marry into her family, it would be better to follow his previous plan of marrying a wife and concubines, but secretly marrying a man to carry on the family line. The future Emperor Qin of the Jiang dynasty should be so willful and domineering. Even if she had 3 husbands and 4 attendants, others had to shut up. It was like a mother beating her son. There was no reason at all. No matter what, she couldn't let those jackals, wolves, tigers, and leopards take advantage of her. Therefore, Lu Shi continued to recommend her with all his might, trying to get her to accept his recommendation. Beautiful. I have a candidate. How about Langya's Wei Zixiao? He was born with a romantic charm and looks like a beautiful woman. He is the immortal Gu Shi. Lu Shi raised his eyebrows at Jiang Pingji. His action seemed frivolous and meaningful, as if all men knew. If it had been someone else who made that gesture and gaze, a perverted expression would have appeared on their faces. However, it was Lu Shi. It had to be said that this was a world where looks mattered the most. When he made that gesture, it had a sense of elegance that made people's hearts sway. Jiang Pingji was embarrassed. She smiled and said, "Why are they all from Langya?" It made all the men in the world, except for those from Langya, look like they were dead. It seemed that her father was really drunk. It is said that Hejian County attracts all the beauties in the world, and Longhuan gathers the literary talents of the human world. Most of the noble ladies in Hejian County are from noble families. They are famous for their beauty and are praised in history books. Langya and Ganning County are full of wise counselors and ministers. They are the places where literary talents gather. Dongqing is the weakest of the 5 countries, but the other 4 countries see it as a thorn in their side. Isn't it because the 3 counties have many talented people? Lu Shi clapped his hands and laughed. Only those outstanding men are worthy of my son's beauty. Didn't Amin say that 2 smart and outstanding people will give birth to even more outstanding offspring? Jiang Pingji smiled and did not say anything. She poured wine and sipped on it. Not long after, Lu Shi, who was sitting on the other side of the table, breathed smoothly and fell asleep. The pear blossoms in the courtyard fell with the night wind, and some naughtily fell into his hair. Sigh, I'm already drunk. Jiang Pingji finished the remaining jars of pear blossom wine and looked at the sky. She got up and gently carried Lu Shi, whose cheeks were red from sleep. Although he was an adult man, his weight was unimaginably light. It was as if his entire body was so thin that only a few bones remained. Lu Shi placed them on the mattress, then covered them with the blanket and tucked in the corners of the blanket. Under the candlelight, the shadows in Lu Shi's eyes were even more pronounced. They are indeed skinny beyond recognition. But what happened back then that caused the Lu residents to become like this? Jiang Pingji was hesitant. She frowned slightly and recalled the hard touch. It seemed that he was so skinny that only bones were left. As he stood up, his gaze fell on a corner of the room. Is that Gu Min's memorial tablet? She paused for a moment and then left Lu Shi's room. She closed the door and made sure that the night wind couldn't get in. She pulled the heavy cloak around her body and chose the shortest path to her courtyard. It was right across the inner garden of the Lu residence. There were lanterns hanging in the corridor. Although the illumination wasn't high, it wasn't enough to cause a fall. She even met a group of guards who were patrolling the night. There were 5 guards in a group. When they saw Jiang Pingji, they all stopped and saluted. Okay. She responded and then returned to her courtyard without looking back. This Lu residence isn't small, but it's hiding a lot of secrets. The water is deep. The corner of Jiang Pingji's lips curled up. In the darkness, there seemed to be a glimmer of light in her dark eyes. The next day, Lu Shi held his swollen and groggy head and lifted the blankets on his body. He sighed in his heart that his body was becoming more and more useless. A few glasses of pear blossom wine could make him faint. He couldn't remember how he had returned to his bedroom from the corridor the night before. He had just gotten up when the maid outside the room, who had heard the noise, asked gently, "Master, are you awake?" "Yes, I'm awake." Lu Shi lay back down and waited for his swollen head to get used to it before he sat up straight. He tidied up his appearance and made sure there was nothing wrong with him before he called for the maid who had been waiting outside the room. He had been married to Gu Min for a few years. It wasn't a long time, but they had been childhood sweethearts. Many of his habits had been influenced by her words and actions since he was a child. For for some of the more intimate and physical tasks, he would usually do it himself if he could. The maid entered the room in a line. Lu Shi took the handkerchief with a cold expression and washed his face with warm water. His muddled mind was completely sober. He didn't drink much. After another night, the smell of alcohol on him was almost non-existent. He put on his specially fumigated clothes, and the fragrance lingered around him. Unless it was Jiang Pingji with a sharp nose, no one would be able to tell if he had alcohol on his clothes. Dressed neatly, Lu Shi looked at the sky outside and silently estimated the time. Did Lanting come this morning? He had slept until the afternoon. No wonder his head hurt so much when he woke up. Drinking too much water would make one tired. Second Lang Jun came to pay his respects this morning, but he didn't let us disturb you when he saw you were sleeping soundly. Lu Shi was silent. Some scenes flashed through his mind. His face turned pale, and he held back the urge to touch his forehead. His image as a noble father. Wasn't it all gone now? The maid lowered her head. She didn't dare to look above Lu Shi's chest. She kept a safe distance from him, so she didn't see Lu Shi's conflicted expression. He looked like he was smiling, but he wasn't. He looked like he was crying, but he wasn't. In other families, this kind of personal maid who served the master of the house would most likely be taken in when the mistress was unwell. Even if she didn't have a proper title, her status would definitely be different from that of an ordinary maid. It could be said that she had flown up the branches and turned into a phoenix. But this rule didn't apply to the Lu family. At least, it didn't work on Lu Shi. The elders in the house all knew that. You can leave. I need some time alone. He really needed some time alone. Being carried by his young daughter like a princess, he felt that his image as a father had collapsed. When the maid left and the door was closed, Lu Shi mumbled to himself in front of his wife's memorial tablet. Is this the chi attack that you mentioned, Amin? Outside the house, a few maids quietly left. One of them was beautiful and lively. She had been bought into the Lu family for less than half a year, but she was already full of vitality. Sister Tong, the master has been back for a few days. Why hasn't he gone to the backyard? The maidservant who was addressed as Sister Tong was an elder in the Lu residence. She was also a first-class maidservant who served Lu Shi. She was only in her early 20s, but she always wore a straight face. She wore no makeup, and she looked gloomy to everyone. The color of her clothes was also dark and gloomy. Chapter 89. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Master, you're just a maid. You have no right to comment on the affairs of the inner courtyard. Tong Sanyang's face was taut as she coldly sized up the little girl from head to toe, clearly seeing through the little girl's delusions. The maid's face turned pale, but she didn't dare to talk back to Tong Sanyang. Before Lu Shi came back, she had been in charge of all the affairs of the main courtyard. She wasn't a steward, but she was more like a steward. Even the old steward liked Tong Sanyang, saying that she was efficient and capable. The maid whispered timidly, I'm just worried. I heard that the place where Master came from is a barren land, caring for Master. That's Madam's business. What does it have to do with you? Tong Sanyang was just short of direct sarcasm. Her eyes were filled with impatience and disdain. She had thought that the maid was a lively and lovely girl, but she was also an idiot with a big heart. The maid was about to defend herself when Tong Sanyang said bluntly, I know what you're thinking. Everyone has their own ambitions. You have your own legs. If you want to climb into the master's bed, who can stop you? I'm just giving you a piece of advice. If you don't want to die, give up. With that, Tong Sanyang snorted coldly and left with light steps. She was fast, but not disorderly. Another idiot. Why didn't she use her brain to think about why all the maids in the mansion, regardless of their age, except for the few in the second Langjuan's courtyard, all wore plain makeup and didn't even dare to wear a hairpin? Why were their clothes made of good material, but not bright colors? Did she really think that the Lu family was like other rich men who would lose their minds after being teased by a woman? As she thought about it, Tong Sanyang couldn't help but recall a scene from many years ago. Even after so many years, those memories hadn't faded. She remembered the scene where the second Lang Jun had ordered his servants to be beaten to death. It was a different scene with a different protagonist, but it was all the same bloody scene. When the late madam passed away, Master followed the rules of etiquette. After the deadline, the old lady secretly sent a few girls who looked similar to the late madam, hoping that they could ease the grief in Master's heart and persuade him to remarry as soon as possible. And the result? Hee. Among them, the one who resembled the late wife was willing to throw away her pride. She took off all her clothes and wrapped herself in a thin quilt to seduce him. She even reached out to second Lang Jun, which caused second Lang Jun, who was already weak, to fall ill and almost die. What happened to the maid in the end? Didn't the old master order people to cut off his entire face and beat him to death? Everyone said that the second son of the Lu family, Lu Shi, was gentle and affectionate, as if he would never get angry. But who knew how ruthless this man could be when he decided to be? He hated the fact that the woman had seduced him with a face that resembled his late wife's. He hated the fact that she had used such a despicable method to murder his second Lang Jun. After the incident, he ordered his men to cut off her face and remove the thin quilt that had been covering her body. He wanted her to be beaten to death naked in the main courtyard. At the time, Tong Sanyang was still young, but she had witnessed that scene with all the maids in the estate. It had become a nightmare to this day. Fortunately, the old madam had arrived in time and was skillful enough to prevent Lu Shi's reputation from being cruel and heartless. After that incident, no one in the entire Lu family had the guts to seduce Lu Shi. Every single one of them wished that they could not wear any makeup. They chose the most mature clothes, and they could not look at the head of the house with their eyes above their necks. All those pretentious actions and expressions of wanting to say something had to be put away. After all, no one would complain about living too long. Tong Sanyang's face was cold and hard. Her eyes seemed to be dripping with ice. Tong Sanyang had left in a hurry, so she did not realize that their conversation had fallen into the ears of a third person. That person was none other than Jiang Pingji. She was sitting on a fake mountain, dressed in a comfortable brown dress. She swung her legs and looked in that direction with a faint smile on her face. She had originally wanted to find a quiet place to meditate and try to pick up where she had left off. Perhaps it was because of the rich experience from her previous life, but Jiang Pingji meditated for the first time in her life. She quickly got on the right track. A wisp of ethereal mental strength surrounded her body and greatly enhanced her five senses. She entered a mysterious state of spiritual emptiness. Although the previous fusion of martial strength was a bit of a cheat, the benefits were not limited to a little increase in martial strength. Not only did her martial strength recover a little, but her mental strength also recovered a lot. She had barely reached the baseline of mental training. The scientific name for mental training was meditation and meditation. It was a training method that the Federation had developed after they entered the interstellar era. When one's mental strength reached a certain level, it could trigger a qualitative change in the body's genes and further strengthen the body. Jiang Pingji did not expect to hear the conversation between Tong Sanyang and the little servant girl. The content of the conversation made her not know whether to laugh or cry. Lu Shi was indeed very young in her era, but in this era, he was old enough to be a grandfather. Yes, if Lu Lanting's eldest brother had not died young, he would have been old enough to find a wife and have children. In other words, Lucy was already half a step into the grandfather's generation. Jiang Pingji watched Tong Sanyang's silhouette as she left. She saw the angry expression on the little servant girl's face. Jiang Pingji's lips curled into a faint smile. No matter the era, power is the most attractive thing a man has. Jumping off the fake mountain, Jiang Pingji went straight to her courtyard. She was greeted by Takshu's indignant face. Lang Jun, why did you go out in this outfit? Takshu was holding a pine green leather cloak in her arms. It was embroidered with delicate cloud patterns and pine leaves. Seeing that the missing Jiang Pingji had returned, she quickly went forward to put it on her. This is not what you should wear. Jiang Pingji did not mind. Clothes are made for people to wear. Why should I wear them? Takshu did not raise her head. This is not suitable for Lang Jun. Jiang Pingji did not refute. Instead, she obediently put on the clothes that Takshu handed to her. Even though the clothes covered her tightly and the cloak on the outside was spacious and the sleeves fluttered when the wind blew, it still could not hide the fact that there was wind underneath. Once again, she began to miss the second ruler in her previous life. Why couldn't Takshu prepare clothes for her that were not open? Her mother, a time traveler, had been in this world for so many years. Couldn't she lead the fashion and recommend clothes for others? Jiang Pingji remained expressionless. She changed into the clothes that Takshu thought suited her status. The wide sleeves made it easy for her to go for a walk. After confirming that there were no problems, she let the system open the streaming room. In less than 2 seconds, the screen was filled with bullet screens that blinded her. Zuingxia Weiguan, damn, I finally made it in. It's so hard to get a seat in this streaming room. Cheng Dong Dong, same to the previous post. It took me more than 2 hours to get a seat and see the legendary streamer. Chapter 90. Fatty Big C, bro, it's good enough to get it. Can you imagine 8 people in a dorm watching the stream together? Paid axing, speaking of which, the host streaming room is too strange. There's a limit of 3,000 people. There are too many monks and not enough porridge. I wonder if there are some rich people lurking around and giving the host a few 9-5 supremes to increase the limit. Hit me if you don't agree, it's useless. The host streaming room is very strange. It's different from the rules of streaming apps. Jiang Pingji looked at the complaints and discussions on the screen. She raised her eyebrows and sent a bullet screen. Host V, don't worry, everyone. The live streaming room limit has been put on the agenda. She posted the content of the semi-interactive and fully interactive streaming modes. Host V, I'm now collecting the content of the fully interactive streaming mode. You can tag whatever you want to see, and I'll select the content to vote for. As for the content of the semi-interactive streaming mode, I'll open it when there's a suitable opportunity. As there was a new group of viewers in the streaming room, Jiang Pingji simply explained in detail what happened in the streaming room. Fatty Big C, I want to see the host go to a brothel. I heard there are many high-quality girls in this room. Maybe it was because of the culture of modern society. Many people were more sensitive to these special industries and were more curious about them. Fatty Big C started the discussion, and the screen was filled with comments about visiting a brothel and looking at girls. Paid axing, that's not right. I heard the host is a girl. Are you guys crazy to let a girl go to a brothel in ancient times? There are all sorts of people there. If the host gets bullied, will you take responsibility? What a bunch of troublemakers. There were some who wanted to cause trouble, and there were also some righteous young men. Apart from paid axing, there was also a small group of viewers who supported him. After all, women in ancient times were very particular about their reputation. If an unmarried girl went to a brothel, even if nothing happened, her reputation would be ruined. Jiang Pingji quietly watched the fun and didn't get involved. However, she also wanted to go. After all, there were many beautiful girls. But Lu Shi's father probably wouldn't want to see his daughter go to a brothel. She silently looked at the bullet screen for a while, then turned her head and said to Takshu with her usual expression, "Go get Suku here." Xuanmei's eyes lit up when she heard Suku's name. She looked at Jiang Pingji with yearning. Takshu was initially reluctant. She did not have a good impression of Suku. However, when she saw Sunmei's reaction, she frowned and immediately accepted the task. The place where Suku lived was not far from Jiang Pingji's courtyard. Takshu was efficient. She quickly brought him over. "Let's go," Jiang Pingji said to Suku. It was the first official training for the servants. She felt that it would be better for her to be there to hold the fort. Suku's small stature was not threatening at all. It was different from the day before. Other than Jiang Pingji's horse carriage, there were 2 bullock carts with heavy loads following behind. Seeing this, Suku could not help but ask suspiciously, "Lang Jun, what are you doing?" Jiang Pingji gave a simple explanation. "Since we're going to train, we can't lack the necessary items. These are prepared for their training. I also asked the sewing room to make a lot of sandbags, but the cloth is rough and normal sand will seep out easily, so I chose dry clay." Suku tilted his head and thought about the pattern Jiang Pingji had drawn. He thought about the large amount of wood she had bought the day before. "The wood you bought yesterday was also for the training?" Jiang Pingji did not hide it. "Yes. It's just that those items are more delicate. The carpenter said it would take 10 days to half a month to produce the finished products. It's still a problem if they can't be used. If they can't be used, we need to find more suitable wood or substitutes." Suku recalled the strange pattern he had seen. He was a little confused. "I heard that the Lu's woodworking workshop is one of the best in Hejin County. The craftsmen there are also skilled and experienced. I wonder what it is that even they have to spend so much effort on." Jiang Pingji tilted her head and looked at him. She said strangely, "Have you ever seen a servant patrolling the courtyard empty-handed?" Since the carpenters were rushing to make them, they were naturally weapons that were more convenient to use. Suku's face changed. "Privately made weapons? Of course not. It's just a crossbow that I improved. It can be used for hunting. Your previous words have reminded me that not everyone has the strength to draw a heavy bow. Even a strong man, if he doesn't eat his fill for a long time, he won't even be able to stand properly, let alone shoot an arrow. Not everyone has the ability to shoot from 100 steps away. If you want to achieve this, you need to train hard for a long time. The efficiency is too low." She did not elaborate, but Suku understood the hidden meaning in her words. Was his Lang Jun hinting that the crossbows she had asked the craftsmen to rush to make could easily shoot a crossbow for those who lacked strength and eyesight? If there really is such a weapon, Lang Jun should choose the craftsman well in case the secret is leaked. Suku looked calm, but his heart was in turmoil. Was there really such a magical thing in the world? Jiang Pingji nodded her head. In this era of cold weapons, the emergence of any advanced weapon could achieve the unexpected effect of changing the outcome of a war. Although she did not care about these things, she could not let others take advantage of them. "I'm not a naive person. For such an important thing, I will naturally find a reliable person." Most people would be naked in front of her when they were completely unprepared. She knew whether or not they could be used. Naive? What does that mean? Suku nodded at first, but then he was confused. Jiang Pingji explained with a straight face, "Silly and naive means unreliable." Many viewers in the streaming room felt sorry for Jiang Pingji as she bullied Suku. Menzugu, #laughter cry. Streamer, it's not nice of you. Don't bully the cute baby. Suku was very similar to a certain young male idol in their era. That young male idol's fans called him cute baby. Shuyan Fang Mian, #goodbye. I've lived for a long time, but this is the first time I know that naive means unreliable. Qing Shan Weishua Bai Tu, someone help. The streamer's language teacher's coffin is about to collapse. Jiang Pingji secretly shrugged. She had learned the word naive from the bullet screen of the streaming audience. How could she be blamed if she misunderstood it? Su Ku listened to the explanation and said seriously, Lang Jun is not naive. Chapter 91. These people can be the first group leaders. If they don't make the cut, we'll eliminate them in the next selection test. Su Ku took the list, glanced at it, and remembered it. Lang Jun, are you really going to lead them to kill the bandits after the training? Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows, and her eyes were sharp. Of course. Do you think I'm joking? Su Ku shook his head. He had seen Jiang Pingji's methods, so he didn't think she was the kind of person who would joke. I don't mean that. It's just that most of the bandits around Hejin County are hiding in the deep mountains, and it's hard to find them. If we get entangled with them, I'm afraid we'll be at a disadvantage. Although he didn't say it directly, Suku wasn't optimistic about it. Let's not talk about that. Those bandits are all desperados. They have nothing to worry about, so they're naturally cruel and bloodthirsty. But those servants don't have the heart to die. It was said that the unreasonable were afraid of the reckless. A group of servants who had no experience in killing had little chance of winning against the bloodthirsty bandits. There's always a first time for everything. What's so scary about killing? Jiang Pingji glanced at Suku. Although he was young and skinny, he had chopped people to death with a hatchet. Since she said so, it was obvious how determined she was. Suku wouldn't ask for a rebuff and continued to persuade her. The training process and specific programs were written in detail in the booklet. They were all basic physical training, so it wasn't difficult to do. Suku gathered everyone together. First, he picked out a few corporals, and then he divided the rest of the servants into groups. The whole process was quiet. The group of people were as obedient as little chicks, waiting for their mother hen to assign tasks. Surprisingly, no one dared to make a sound and cause trouble. What a joke. Did they dare to make a sound? Yesterday, the fiend who single-handedly defeated more than 10 of them was staring at them from the side. Who would want to live too long? Thinking about the scene from the day before, the places where Jiang Pingji beat them still hurt. Because the training environment was too simple, the training programs were naturally not fancy, so basic physical training programs were very common. Wolf Shui In Feng Mian, it feels like an ancient military training. Patrick Starr, this is much more difficult than military training. When I was in school, military training was either running or walking in a square formation. It was actually quite easy. As for these people, after a period of training, they would be sent to suppress bandits. If they were not careful, they would lose their lives. Fatty Big C, I just finished military training a month ago. It's much easier than them. Full mouth of dog food, but is this training useful? Why did it feel so unreliable? Turu Feicho, it can't be like that. How can the host be so unreliable? How could Jiang Pingji not have considered these things that even the live stream viewers knew? Pure physical training could only make these servants stronger and stronger, but it was not enough to fight the bandits to the death with just this. After all, they were the embryonic form of an orderly troop, not a pile of loose sand that fought on their own. They didn't need powerful individual combat abilities, but they needed to learn how to cooperate in small groups. Running 10,000 meters 3 times a day doesn't mean that you can finish it with all your might. This method is the dumbest. You will run out of energy one by one, and when you reach the finish line, you will be too tired to get up. Let's say you are a speedy troop that received orders to support a battlefield. If you follow this method, even if you arrive in time, you will be a tired troop with no combat ability. Jiang Pingji watched these people run around several ridges for the time it took to burn a stick of incense. Even though they were panting from exhaustion and their legs felt like they were filled with lead, none of them completed the task. She frowned under the sun, and Su Ku was afraid that she would be angry. Although he knew that Jiang Pingji's words made sense, Su Ku felt that her standards were too high. He tried to persuade her, Lang Jun, don't be angry. After all, these people are training for the first time. They will not be used to it. If we give them some time, I think, Xiaoyu, this has nothing to do with whether they are used to it or not. I know what you want to say. They are all bought by the broker house, so their physical condition is not as good as those strong men who have been farming for a long time. Because they don't eat much rice, their strength is not as good as others, so it is reasonable that they can't finish the prescribed distance. But I want to say that this is not correct, because they don't know how to run. It would be strange if they could last 10,000 meters if they sped up from the beginning. Jiang Pingji tried to explain in words that everyone could understand. Long-distance running not only tests physical strength and endurance, but also other things. Blindly running will only waste the body's energy. The best situation is to maintain a uniform speed and use it reasonably. Not only that, but they also have to learn how to maintain a reasonable breathing rhythm while running. That kind of rapid breathing will make people more tired. And the range of running, like that person who wanted to swing his arm to the sky, is ridiculously wrong. More importantly, the running posture was too eye-catching. This was the most basic physical training. There would be all kinds of weight-bearing events in the future, and it would be even more tiring. Looking at these guys, there was only one word in Jiang Pingji's mind, chicken. Thinking back, even when she was selected to be trained in a low-level military school when she was still a turnip, the training intensity was more than 10 times higher than these people. She steadily withstood it. These men were all like soft-footed shrimps, they couldn't even compete with her when she was 5 or 6 years old. Chicken. If you don't train well now, you will have no bones left in the future. Jiang Pingji sneered and concluded. Su Ku, who was beside her, was as silent as a chicken, and he did not try to persuade her. He understood that Jiang Pingji did not use the standard of a normal servant to ask these people, but the standard of a tiger, wolf, and bear soldier. As the saying goes, speed is the most important thing in war. For an army, they could easily travel hundreds of miles in a day. It was okay to rush to help or to launch a surprise attack. If they were in such a state, they would not be able to arrive in time even if they risked their lives. When the time came, the people and horses would be exhausted, and they would be ambushed by the enemy who was waiting for them. Of course, this once again proved how ambitious his Lang Jun was. She really wanted to cause trouble. One by one, get up. Lying on the ground and panting like dogs. Don't you think it's ugly? Jiang Pingji looked at them disdainfully and chased them up from the ground like she was chasing ducks. Her movements were not gentle at all. Looking at these people getting up in 2s and 3s, although their faces were ugly, they were not at their limit. She was slightly satisfied. When they are done with their training, I will buy some younger ones. The old will guide the new. That way, your task will be lighter. Chapter 92. Novel Network, to provide you with exciting novel reading. Since it was just the beginning, the training was very basic. There was physical training in the morning and a 10,000-meter run 3 times a day. In the afternoon, they practiced the spear made from a wooden stick. They practiced the basic movements of blocking, holding, stabbing, wrapping, circling, pouncing, pointing, and pushing. She knew about the spear and the spear because she had been to the Museum of Ancient Times in her previous life. The history of the evolution of weapons in the military school also briefly described the evolution and development of weapons in the ancient times, modern times, ancient times, modern times, and modern times. Suku held the spear that the carpentry workshop had rushed to make. He weighed it in his hand and suddenly thrust it forward. It looked quite imposing. I couldn't tell. You look as weak as a chicken, but when you play with a spear, you have quite a bit of power. Suko was speechless. Chicken. Chicken. Ha ha ha, so that's how Lang Jun sees him. Tao Wu put away the spear. Suko looked like he had nothing left to live for. Lang Jun, I'm sorry. Jiang Pingji smiled without saying a word. She raised her hand and pointed at the other wooden spear. The spear bounced up and jumped into Jiang Pingji's palm. She smiled and said, "Do you want to loosen your muscles and bones?" Suko was stunned. Before he could understand what she meant, a wooden spear came at him. He subconsciously blocked it with the body of the spear, but he found that Jiang Pingji did not use much strength. It looked like she was just fooling around. With this in mind, Suko felt a little more confident. If that's the case, Lang Jun, please come. The audience watching the live stream found that Suko could use the wooden spear so skillfully. His moves were simple and clean, which greatly overturned the impression of a weak scholar they had in their minds. That skill, that posture. How did he look like a weak chicken? In fact, the 6 arts of a gentleman included etiquette, music, archery, imperial carriage, calligraphy, and mathematics. Many scholars could pick up a pen and write poems, ride a horse and play with a spear and shoot arrows, and more or less had some martial arts. Even though most of them were just for show, they looked good but were useless. However, it didn't matter if he was just for show or not. For Jiang Pingji, it didn't make much of a difference. They fought for the time it took to burn a stick of incense. Suka's legs were weak, his eyes were dizzy, his arms were swollen, his palms were bleeding from the rough wooden spear, and his whole body was drenched in sweat. But Jiang Pingji still looked like nothing had happened. Even her breathing was not irregular, and her forehead was dry. Young people still need to train. His arms are as soft as noodles. This won't do. She smiled and stabbed the wooden spear into the ground. Like a knife cutting through tofu, half of the spear entered the ground. I'm not talented, but Lang Jun is brave. Suko cupped his hands and smiled bitterly. He was better at using his brain, and this kind of activity almost made him sprain his waist. As for Jiang Pingji's teasing, he just ignored it and didn't take it to heart. You're still young, so you need to train more. I'm weak and have a lot of problems. I can't stay idle. If you follow me, you really have to train hard. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll get tired. Jiang Pingji smiled and encouraged him. Literature can bring peace to the world, and martial arts can bring peace to the world. Just thinking about it makes my blood boil. Xiaoyu, if you're willing, you can train with these people. She could see that Suku did have some skills. Wouldn't it be a pity to waste them? I was young and ignorant. I was a ranger for a period of time. Later, I met my teacher and was enlightened. That's why I became obsessed with the sage's books. Every man had the dream of being a great hero. He would help the weak and rob from the rich to help the poor. Suko was no exception. He had a period of chinibu, but in the end, he put down his sword and picked up his brush to study quietly. He wanted to be a good son who could make his mother feel at ease. It was a pity that his mother died young before she could enjoy her son's filial piety for a few years. Jiang Pingji tilted her head and complained, young and ignorant. You make it sound like you're very mature now. Su Ku was speechless. On the other side, a friend who was watching the live stream gave Su Ku an emoji. Cafeteria Daffin Auntie, young Su Ku, Lang Jun, I'm telling you, you'll lose your baby if you keep this up. Jiang Pingji glanced at it and said to Su Ku with a smile. Were you thinking that if I continued to tease you, you'd throw a tantrum? Su Ku blushed and said awkwardly. Lang Jun, please don't joke around. Jiang Pingji said to him seriously, actually, you can throw a tantrum. I can tolerate it. A little temper makes you cuter. In her eyes, Su Ku was a teenager who threw a tantrum. It was fine for him to be stubborn once in a while. Su Ku was silent. How should he, as a page boy, deal with his Lang Jun, who was 5 years younger than him, rudely throwing a tantrum in front of him? Hurry! I'm waiting online. Reality proved that a rabbit would bite when it was anxious, and Su Ku would choke when he was anxious. Lang Jun, you should save your sweet words for the girls in Lang Lang Alley. After saying that, Su Ku cupped his hands and bowed, then flicked his sleeves and left. He could not vent his anger on Jiang Pingji, but it was not a problem for him to torment the servants. The more he understood, the more he felt that the image of the noble son in his mind was crumbling. Of course, it would not take long for him to realize that it was not the noble son who crumbled, but his weird Lang Jun. Tisk, tsk. Speaking of looks, the girls in Lang Lang Alley may not be as elegant as Xiaoyu. Jiang Pingji lowered her voice to make sure that Su Ku, who was swinging his sleeves, could hear her. Then, Jiang Pingji saw him stumble and miss his footing. He rolled down the ridge of the field. The audience in the streaming room felt sorry for Su Ku when he couldn't help teasing her. Canteen Daffin Auntie, streamer, you are so evil. You even bully a cute kid like Su Ku. I can't bear to see it. She's so adorable, so beautiful, how could you be so cruel to her? I really wanted to rush out of the screen and hug him. Bideo Zhangzi, I've never seen such an evil streamer. Look, you scared him. Sakaetu too, people in ancient times are very serious. If you do that, he may hate you. Be careful, he might become evil. Xian, ha ha ha, I'm looking forward to Su Ku's evil appearance. Then, he will fall in love with the heartless streamer. Jiang Pingji ignored the teasing comments on the screen. She walked to the ridge of the field, squatted down, and carried Su Ku, who was lying on the ground, on her back. Su Ku was shocked by her actions again. His body was obviously stiff and his muscles were tense. You're so careless even when you're walking. Fortunately, the ridge is low and has been carefully cleaned by the tenant farmers. There aren't any big rocks. Otherwise, you might have broken a leg and disfigured yourself. Jiang Pingji was carrying him on her back, but her steps were light and vigorous. Su Ku finally recovered from the shock. He did not know where to put his hands, and his face was full of embarrassment. Hearing Jiang Pingji's accusation, Su Ku felt a sense of helplessness. Chapter 93. Am I wrong to say that you're good-looking? Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows and said matter-of-factly, it's something to be proud of if you're good-looking. It means that your appearance is much better than the average person. Love go small talk net Su Ku could neither swallow nor spit it out. His originally pale face turned purple from the suffocation. That wasn't a compliment. She was flirting with him. I'll take you to Lang Lang Alley when I'm free. I don't want you to say that I'm flirting with you. She was always wrong. Su Ku was speechless. Jiang Pingji continued, but with your looks, I don't know if you're playing with them or if they're playing with you. Su Ku was speechless. Could she stop talking about Lang Lang Alley? She was going to be traumatized. Cafeteria Daffin Auntie, then it must be those coquettish bitches playing with Suku. You'll be at a disadvantage if you go there. Even though the viewers in the streaming room were a bit weird, they had a normal aesthetic sense. They all felt that Suku would be at a disadvantage if he went to Lang Lang Alley. Thinking of the innocent young Suku falling into a group of coquettish B***cheese and being tossed and turned by them, he started to cry pitifully. At that moment, howls and howls could be heard from all directions in the live stream room. Xian, has the streamer decided to go to a brothel? You have to let me know when you're going to stream. Jiang Pingji promised, but she never expected that she would go to Lang Lang Alley under such circumstances. Love goes small talk net ku, I just sprained my ankle. I'll be fine after a few days of rest and some medicine. Jiang Pingji was not a doctor, but she was constantly injured, both internally and externally. After a long period of time, she could be considered a doctor. Moreover, there were compulsory courses in the military school for first aid. Jiang Pingji had learned some, so it was not a problem for her to deal with such minor injuries. Lang Jun, you know medicine. Suku calmed down a lot, and his impression of Jiang Pingji was renewed. What lofty! What great talent! What wise lord! They were all the result of his blind judgment. She hated herself for being blind at that time. Why did she feel that this Lang Jun in front of her was a wise ruler? Jiang Pingji lied without blinking. My mother has been bedridden all year round. How can I be at ease? In his spare time, he had read some medical books and learned some superficial techniques and superficial knowledge. He couldn't be considered to be an expert in medicine. Speaking of which, I thought of something important. Suku was a very serious young man. Once serious business was brought up, his attention was involuntarily diverted. What is it? I took a look at their training today. These people really know how to endure hardship. They didn't cut corners during training, nor did they play tricks. It's just that I used too much force. If I don't take a good rest, I'm afraid I won't even be able to get up tomorrow, let alone train. Jiang Pingji could not help but think of her first days in a low-level military school in her previous life. It was tiring but fulfilling. After training, she had a special muscle-soothing nutrient solution, which was good for relieving fatigue and maintaining her training condition. However, the medical technology in this era was so backward that she couldn't count on nutrient solutions. She couldn't even use them herself, so she could only use another method instead. Moreover, it had to be more in line with this era and not too scary. Suku thought back to those people's training. After a day of torment, they were really exhausted. When they had a big pot to eat, they were like hungry wolves. They fought for food faster than anyone else, as if they were afraid that they would not have enough to eat. Training consumed a lot of energy. Lang Jun, do you have a way to deal with it? Jiang Pingji said, of course I do. I'll go back and draw a picture for you. Just follow it. The method she was talking about was the most basic massage. Almost all the students in the military school knew the basic techniques. Low-level military schools were very common. Most of the students there were ordinary people. Not everyone had the luxury of using nutrient solutions to relieve the stress of training. If Jiang Pingji had not been born with high numbers and potential, she would not have been lucky enough to be chosen as the focus of training. Of course, if she wanted to maximize the benefits, it was best to condense her mental strength on her fingertips to stimulate the activity of the muscles. However, mental strength was a mysterious thing. If she said it out loud, people might mistake it as nonsense. Jiang Pingji spent some time to draw a few simple pictures. She added some words to make sure that Suku could understand. Suku took the pictures and looked at them. His expression softened a little. He said, Lang Jun, thank you. It seemed that Lang Jun was quite reliable. While Jiang Pingji was drawing, there were also some viewers who were more careful. They used their phones or computers to record and take pictures. They wanted to try it out after taking a shower at night to see how it worked. Because of Jiang Pingji's arrangement, Su Ku lived in the farm during the early stages of training. He did not have to go back to the loos at night. If he needed to borrow any books, he could go back. All in all, except for the occasional unreliability of Lang Jun, the loos were treated very well. Su Ku tried to use his strength and found that his sprained foot did not hurt anymore. He stood up and sent her back. Before leaving, Jiang Pingji suddenly stopped and looked at Su Ku. Her gaze made Su Ku break out in cold sweat. Lang Jun. Remember one thing. You are now my servant, Jiang Pingji said with an inexplicable meaning. Jiang Pingji said with an inexplicable meaning, I'll let it go for today. From tomorrow onwards, remember this well. Su Ku's eyes were filled with suspicion. Then he suddenly understood and his face turned pale. Don't be so afraid. If you have anything to say, just tell him directly. He won't not understand. Jiang Pingji curled her lips, slapped the sandalwood fan in her hand, and closed it with a swoosh. That night, Su Ku smiled bitterly at the brush and ink on the long table. After thinking for a while, he picked up the brush and put it on the bamboo paper. As the servant of the second Lang Jun of the loos, he received a fixed amount of brush, ink, and bamboo paper, in addition to the money he received every month. When the gods fight, the mortals suffer. It's not a good thing to be between the father and the son. But Lang Jun is right. Instead of suffering from both sides, it was better to stand firmly on one side. After Su Ku finished writing, he put the bamboo paper on the candle to warm it. When the ink was dry, he rolled it into a roll and walked to the porch. He waved at the sky. Not long after, a snow-white pigeon fluttered its wings and landed on his arm. It had a small bamboo tube tied to its claw. It was a messenger pigeon from Zhongzhou in the hinterland of the Central Plains to Dongqing. After a few years of development, in Dongqing, as long as the family was wealthy, they would raise and train a few pigeons to send messages. Coo-coo, Lu Shi heard the pigeons cry. He got up and picked up the pigeon. He took out the bamboo paper and read it quickly. After a long time, he could not help but laugh. Chapter 94. Jiang Pingji returned to the loos. As soon as she stepped through the gate, the system beeped and a mission letter popped up. System, dear host Jiang Pingji, the results of the preliminary selection for your first fully interactive live stream have been released. The topic with the most votes is I'm visiting a brothel in ancient times. Please complete the live stream within 3 days. It was an automatic notification from the system. Jiang Pingji glanced at it and then threw it into the system's trash can. I'm indeed visiting a brothel. Sure enough, this kind of thing always attracts people's curiosity. Jiang Pingji held her forehead. She had lost all hope for the viewers who did not go offline. She did not want to live stream anymore. If she blushed and drew a level advancement card, wouldn't that mean that her experience would become 10,000? The system said quietly, actually, I want to go too. Jiang Pingji was speechless. A system that only had data and no substance. Why would it want to go to a brothel? It was incompetent. It was still early for her to return to the Lu residence. She first went to her courtyard to freshen up. Although she did not sweat much, she was still somewhat dirty after shuttling back and forth in the fields for a long time. Moreover, she still had to endure Takshu's nagging. Lang Jun, you are so precious. You can just leave everything to Su Ku. You have to do it yourself. That's great. I've never seen Lang Jun look so dirty. 2 of his handkerchiefs are dirty. Jiang Pingji knew very well that she could not argue with the woman at this time, because no matter how reasonable she was, it would be unreasonable. Silence was the best comfort. As expected, Takshu felt that Jiang Pingji's attitude was good. She finally stopped nagging and closed her mouth. At that moment, Jiang Pingji did not expect Su Ke to have the guts to play a trick on her. Jiang Pingji accompanied Lu Shi and Madame Hu for dinner. She was in a good mood and ate 2 more bowls of rice. She ate more than Lu Shi and Madame Hu combined, but she put down her chopsticks at the same time as them. Lanting is still growing. Ask the kitchen to make 2 more meat dishes. Lu Shi had never had a good appetite, but when he looked at his daughter's face, he could eat a bowl of rice without stopping. Madame Hu, who knew him very well, secretly rolled her eyes. She couldn't be bothered to maintain her usual elegant demeanor. Madame Hu did not want to be known as someone who mistreated the late wife's son. She did not want to remind Lu Shi that he was sitting next to his daughter and not his son. If she continued to feed him without restraint, he would be so fat that he would be slaughtered by the end of the year. Jiang Pingji had never had the concept of gaining weight. To her, the food she ate would only become firm muscles, not fat. After shyly thanking Lu Shi, Jiang Pingji resumed her posture of looking down and wondering when Lu Shi would speak. It wasn't that she didn't know that Lu Shi always asked about her life through Su Ke. His original intention was to care about her and nothing else. His original intention was not bad. She actually quite enjoyed this kind of concern. But Jiang Pingji was rational. She knew that she could not enjoy it for long. If she did not stop it soon, it would one day become a malignant tumor and become the root of the rift between father and son. Even the most intimate people had to maintain a certain distance, especially between a father and a son. The former had the natural responsibility to raise the latter. She had a very strong personality. She couldn't stand other people telling her what to do for no reason. She also couldn't accept other people trying to control her life all the time. It was like a steel cage imprisoning her in a corner of the world, even if that person was Lu Shi. She could enjoy it if it happened once or twice, but she could not guarantee that she would not fall out with him. So to prevent the worst from happening, it was better to make things clear as soon as possible. If Lu Shi wanted to know something, he could ask her directly instead of going through a third party. But she did not expect Lu Shi to not play by the rules. He did not feel embarrassed at all when he confessed that he knew about his daughter through Su Ke. What he said made Jiang Pingji want to kneel in front of him. Su Ke sent me a messenger pigeon. He said that you were curious about Lang Lang Alley. It was dessert time for the family. It was also a time to talk and cultivate their relationship. The atmosphere was not as dull as it was during dinner. Jiang Pingji asked, "What?" Madame Hu glared at Lu Shi. She looked like she would strangle him if he said another word. "Yes, I did," Jiang Pingji admitted. She was not only curious, but she also planned to go to the alley the next day. "But why did you bring this up all of a sudden, father?" She looked at Madame Hu and motioned for Lu Shi to calm down. Talking about brothels with his son in front of his concubine. Was he not afraid of being beaten to death? However, Lu Shi was too cunning. How could he betray Su Ke? "You are not young anymore. There are some things that you should know." Lu Shi raised his eyebrows at her suggestively. Jiang Pingji almost choked on the tea she was holding in her mouth. Before she could cough, Madame Hu raised her hand and flipped the table in front of her into the air. It fell to the ground with a loud crash. Madame Hu gritted her teeth and shouted at Lu Shi, "Lu Zhongqing." Lu Shi did not have the slightest idea that his backyard was in trouble. Instead, he smiled gently. "Cousin, do you want to go too?" Jiang Pingji was speechless. Not only did he talk about brothels in front of his concubine, he even asked if she wanted to go with him. Jiang Pingji wanted to kneel in front of her. Be careful, Sister Amin might come and strangle you to death tonight. You're really, Madame whose face turned red with anger. She was so angry, but She was still smiling calmly. He was not affected in the slightest. Humph. Madame Hu flung her sleeves angrily and strode out of the main courtyard. That's her temper. Don't be scared. She regained his gentle and serious look. It's normal for someone your age to be curious about that kind of place. Instead of waiting for you to go there quietly and run into something you can't handle, it's better for me to bring you there and broaden your horizons. Once you see it with your own eyes, you won't be curious anymore. Jiang Pingji was speechless. It was a good reason, but why did she feel that something was wrong? Father, you don't seem surprised at all. Jiang Pingji swore that it was not Shi's first time going to that kind of place. It was a lie to say that he loved Gu Min. I used to be your age. How could I not know? Shi was very open-minded. His eyes were clear and gentle. By the way, your mother was the one who encouraged me to go there for the first time. Jiang Pingji was speechless. Chapter 95. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Shi said gently, the harmony of yin and yang is the right thing to do. What's there to be shy about? When a teenager, or girl, reaches a certain age, their curiosity toward the opposite sex will reach a high level. It's as if there's a soft claw scratching at their hearts. Stopping them with righteous words or reprimanding them for a long time will only stimulate their rebellious mentality. Jiang Pingji was speechless. She was afraid that if she said a few more words, her father would turn back to his room and toss her 2 paintings of avoiding fire. Thinking about that beautiful scene was too painful for her eyes. She didn't dare to look at it. Speaking of which, Father, have you forgotten that you are raising a daughter, not a son? Shi made the decision and said, there's no time like the present. Let's do it today. Jiang Pingji maintained a calm expression on her face, but she was already cursing the system in her heart. I feel like I've come to a pirated ancient era. How can someone like Shi survive in such an environment? The system pretended to be dead again. After all, Gu Min's appearance in this era was inseparable from it. Forget it. Let's do it tonight. I don't want to have to make a trip in the future. The audience in the streaming room was surprised to find that the streaming room, which had been closed for less than 2 hours, was back up again. There was also an option to vote on audience satisfaction. The subtitle of the streaming room was, A Night at a Brothel in the Ancient Era. Awesome streamer. Pudding is not pudding, what the F***ck. It's rare for me to come in, but I'm so lucky to have such an important stream. The streaming room had a maximum audience of 3,000, but there were many who wanted to watch the stream. Many people watched Jiang Pingji's stream through videos. Even though they had never entered the streaming room, Jiang Pingji's unique style left a deep impression on them. Peacock Southeast flies. Is the streamer going to have sex with a human? Will it be banned? Last time, there was a streamer on the roasted fish platform who broadcast the process of making a human. However, it wasn't long before it was banned by the management. In the end, she was even called over by the police for tea. Liang Fengyoxing, come on, the streamer's streaming room is amazing. I have a relative who works on the grilled fish platform. He told me that although the host's room number can be found, they don't have the data at all, so they can't block it. Chuyue Wubian, in other words, if the streamer really wants to put on a big show, we can also watch as much as we want. Dolly Buting, no way, the host looks like she's still underage. What's so good about her figure? She's just a frying pan. Now, previous user, if you keep talking like this, the host might go crazy and show you what it means to be sliced into 1,000 pieces. It's definitely bloody and violent. You might even wet your pants. The host was a woman. If she wanted to have sex, she would have gone to a small brothel, not a brothel. Daming Hao Nan, when it comes to sanitary napkins, you think of women's menstruation. When it comes to brothels, you think of men and women having sex. Is your brain filled with perverted trash? Could their thoughts be a little more pure? This was clearly a very serious and inspiring live broadcast room. Because of the sudden start of the live broadcast, many old viewers were unable to squeeze in. 90% of the live broadcast room were unfamiliar faces, and the atmosphere became a little impetuous. Jiang Pingji took a look and her expression became colder and colder. There would always be people who did not learn their lesson. It was okay to joke, but it depended on who the person was joking with. If it was just a stranger, the joke would not be a joke. It would be vulgar and vulgar. Xian, am I the only one who noticed that the host's father is in the carriage? Excuse me. Many viewers were dumbfounded. What was going on? Langlang Alley was located on a street near the market in Hejin County. It was very far away from the Lu residence, Sanshu Street. Jiang Pingji used the fan to slightly open the curtain of the carriage. The sky outside had already turned dark, but both sides of the street were filled with red lights, which made the night look bright. A gust of wind mixed with many fragrances blew over, which made Jiang Pingji, whose 5 senses were very sensitive, suffer. This is Langlang Alley. It looks so lively. Unlike the other countries, Dongqing did not have a curfew. Therefore, every night, the streets nearby were insanely lively. Here, even the air was thick with a romantic atmosphere. It seemed to have become the best catalyst. However, for Jiang Pingji, the suffering was greater than the enjoyment. What's more, the woman she glanced at was not very good-looking. Bad review. Lu Shi sat up straight with a smile on his face. Of course not. Oh. Lu Shi explained, Langlang Alley was built at the beginning of the Xia dynasty. It has always been divided into 1 pavilion, 4 courtyards, and 12 palaces. It has been passed down since then, and it has lasted for hundreds of years. In the Great Xia dynasty, many high-ranking officials and nobles are willing to spend a fortune just for a smile from a beauty in Langlang Alley. Even though it's a brothel, it's still a rare place of elegance. Those who aren't from prominent families can't enter. It sounds different from what I imagined. Jiang Pingji frowned. Lu Shi sneered and said disdainfully, what's the difference? Langlang Alley seems to have a high threshold, but it is just a way to raise one's value. They are indifferent to you because the value you offer them is not high enough, and what they can get is too little. It has nothing to do with other affairs. If it was still in the Xia dynasty, Langlang Alley would have been an extraordinary place. It was just a place of prostitution, but there were so many extraordinary women. But after the establishment of Dongqing, Langlang Alley became an ordinary place of prostitution. Many brothels opened along the street. That's what you see now. It is a place where ordinary men and women seek pleasure. It looks prosperous, but it is actually rotten. The carriage passed through the long street full of red lanterns and drove into an alley. The temperature seemed to drop suddenly, and the smell in the air became lighter. It was neither too light nor too strong. It was like a dandelion brushing against the back of one's hand, itchy and smooth. Here we are. Jiang Pingji lifted the curtain and read the words on the plaque. Hanyan Courtyard. Shall we go in? It was more of a mansion than a courtyard. The facade was neat and tidy, and it was several times bigger than the Lu mansion. Lu Shi closed his eyes and thought for a while. He changed his mind and said, "No, let's find another one." "Why?" Jiang Pingji asked in confusion. She also asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "You don't look interested at all." Although this Hanyan courtyard is a place of prostitution, the women there are all talented women who are good at music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Many patrons come to our door not for the joy of family relations, but more to drink a few cups of sake. The more advanced a brothel was, the more noble the women there were. Some of them were as good as the women of noble families. Chapter 96. Lu Shi paused and his expression turned strange. After a long time, he said, "Your mother calls this behavior pretentious of a beast in human clothing. Love go little say net w. True men who come to Lang Lang Alley to seek pleasure must come from well-off families and have many wives and concubines. However, they still like to come to this kind of place. Why do you think they do so? It's not because of the women's looks, but because of their talents. There were few literate women, and women who were well-read, talented, and considerate were even rarer. Those men didn't have a common language with their wives and concubines at home, and they couldn't talk for a long time. But when they came to Lang Lang Alley, they could find their soulmates and talk happily. It was more satisfying than having sex. It was hard for people who weren't of the same kind to understand. At first, Lu Shi thought it made sense, but as soon as he expressed his opinion, Gu Min scolded him. "Mother, you're such a clever person. You're so insightful." Jiang Pingji agreed. Wasn't it pretentious of a beast in human clothing? If that's the case, Lang Lang Alley should be quiet. Why don't you go there, father? Lu Shi looked down and said, "You like crowds. I don't think you'll find an atmosphere you like there." Jiang Pingji was speechless. Pudding is not pudding, no one knows a daughter better than her father. "Father, let me give you a like." "Xian, wow, the host's father is still so cute. It feels super harmonious when father and daughter get along. Especially when the host's father teases the host seriously. I can feel the host's powerlessness in the bullet screen. Chow Zhao Mu Mu, ha ha ha, the host has met her nemesis. Now, I bet on a spicy stick that the host's inner bullet screen is full of sh*t. Lu Shi picked a brothel with a large area and a lot of customers. The name was very tacky, Ingchun Brothel. Even though Lu Shi had left Hejin County for many years and no one remembered his face, his elegance coupled with his exquisite silk cloak made him stand out in the crowd. He was the kind that could be found in a sea of people at a glance. The brothel keeper's eyes lit up, and she welcomed her enthusiastically. Jiang Pingji could not help but think of the woman broker she saw in the broker house that day. "Guests, please come in." The brothel keeper waved her fragrant handkerchief. Lu Shi furrowed his brows and took a step back to avoid the brothel keeper's hand. "Find the prettiest woman here to serve me. I want a private room, and don't be too noisy." Lu Shi's expression remained cold and indifferent. He wasn't as frivolous or joyful as other men who were looking for pleasure. The madam was puzzled, but she had been in the brothel for many years. She had good judgment. The man in front of her was obviously not here to have fun. Thus, the madam lowered her head slightly and silently met Jiang Pingji's gaze. So he was the one who was looking for pleasure. The madam instantly knew the truth. Her heavily made-up face bloomed like a flower. "Don't worry, sir. In this area, everyone knows that the girls in our Ingchun house are the best. I guarantee you will enjoy yourself to the fullest." After saying that, the madam turned around and called for a skinny girl in green to lead the two to a private room. The madam looked to be in her early 30s. In the eyes of the people of this era, she was already middle-aged. However, the charm that she exuded was not something that young ladies could imitate. Her charm was still there, so Jiang Pingji watched her leave. Lu Shi looked down and asked Jiang Pingji what was wrong with his eyes. Jiang Pingji opened the sandalwood fan in her hand and used it to cover her face. Only a pair of smiling eyes could be seen. The way that Madam walks reminds me of a phrase, swaying. The corner of Lu Shi's mouth twitched. He made an "oh" sound as if he had nothing left to live for. Why did he feel that something was not right? Please follow me, Lang Jun. The girl in green was still young. She looked to be no more than 10 years old. However, after living in such a place for a long time, she had developed an extraordinary eye for people. Whether it was the way she spoke or the way she bowed, she looked very proper. Jiang Pingji furrowed her brows and suppressed her 5 senses. Only then did she feel better. The private room was not small. When the girl in green opened the door, the elegant attire that came into view was refreshing. A private room, a private room. It lives up to the word elegant. Go get someone to prepare a table of light vegetarian dishes and bring 2 pots of sake over. Jiang Pingji looked around and then sat down at the 4-corner table in the middle of the private room. She leaned against the table and seemed to be enjoying herself. By the way, do you have any girls who sing for fun? Pudding is not pudding, I'll bet a spicy stick that the streamer is a veteran. Didn't you see the look of despair on her father's face? The Livestream audience member said what Lu Shi was thinking. He was a little nervous when he saw that his daughter was familiar with the place and did not seem to have any stage fright at all. Could it be that before he came back, his daughter was already a regular customer here? Lu Shi could be considered calm, but he could no longer remain calm. Jiang Pingji could read the voice in Lu Shi's mind. She raised her hand, flipped the teacup on the table, and poured herself a cup. Father, don't overthink it. It's my first time here. Lu Shi was speechless. She was trying to cover it up. Before the father and daughter could further discuss the issue, the figure who was kneeling outside the door bowed slightly. Lang Jun, the girls are here. Jiang Pingji said boldly, come in. Then, the door opened and 2 girls, about 16 or 17 years old, came in. The material of their clothes was comparable to that of a normal girl from a wealthy family. Behind them were 4 girls who were holding musical instruments and had their hair combed into a girl's bun. The former sat next to Jiang Pingji and Lu Shi. One was delicate and the other was bright and beautiful. The latter sat quietly in the corner of the private room. Host V, do you want to sing? In a split second, the screen was filled with all kinds of song titles that were obviously not serious at a glance. Jiang Pingji saw one of them and turned to the 4 girls. Do you know how to sing 18 Moons? Pfft, even Lu Shi could not maintain his elegant demeanor at that moment. He spat out half a mouthful of tea that he had not yet swallowed. The girls who were singing looked at each other, and their cheeks turned red. Although it was a place to seek pleasure and nothing was too excessive, it was rare to see someone as upright as Jiang Pingji and Lu Shi. Jiang Pingji was still young, but Lu Shi, who was beside her, was at the age where a man's charm was at its peak. There was an indescribable sense of shame in singing that kind of flirtatious song in front of such an immortal-like person. Go and serve her. I don't need anyone else here. Lu Shi quickly recovered and slightly tidied up his messy appearance. He did not look too good. Once again, he firmly believed that it was not his daughter's first time here. Chapter 97. Lu Shi reflected on himself and pushed away the pretty girl who was trying to get close to him. Jiang Pingji held the fan and smiled. I'm just kidding. Just pick some soothing songs. She used her folding fan to lift the bright girl's chin and looked into the other's affectionate eyes. Sure enough, it was a pair of extremely beautiful limpid eyes that were just right. Not one bit more would make them look too weak, and not one bit less would make them look too lifeless. Jiang Pingji complained to Lu Shi, "You are so insensitive. How can you reject such a beautiful girl so rudely? You have to be tactful if you want to reject her. Aren't you going to hurt her?" Lu Shi glanced at Jiang Pingji. His meaning was clear. "What are you trying to do?" After coming to Yingchen brothel, he found that his daughter had started to let herself loose. He was worried. Jiang Pingji knew when to stop. What if Lu Shi refused to pay the bill if things went too far? It was okay to have fun in a brothel, but it was too much not to pay. Jiang Pingji smiled wickedly, revealing her white teeth, as the audience in the streaming room howled and the bullet screen filled with jealousy and hate. Lu Shi found the scene a little hard to look at. There had been a rumor that his daughter was a playboy, but as her father, he didn't believe it. Then, he was slapped in the face by his daughter's actions. "Hey, what kind of fragrance does this fairy-like lady use on her body? Why does it smell so good?" Lu Shi didn't pay attention to her for a while. Jiang Pingji was already talking to the two girls. They seemed to be very close. Lu Shi moved closer to the delicate girl. The girl's cheeks were flushed and she looked extremely shy. Lu Shi slowly moved closer to the girl's neck. From the outside, it looked as if she was half lying in the girl's arms. The two of them were so intimate that Lu Shi felt even more hopeless. The pretty girl blushed and said in a low voice, "I made all the perfume myself." The perfume on the market didn't suit everyone's skin. For the girls in the brothel, the condition of their skin was more important. The girls in the brothel were not to be underestimated. They all had their own unique skills. She was not good at making perfume herself. "You made it yourself. This smell is indeed very unique. It's fragrant but not greasy, thick but not overwhelming, and lingers for a long time. Truly fragrant." Jiang Pingji sniffed carefully again. If one paid close attention, one would notice that there was some interest in her eyes, as if she had found some evidence. This fragrance was somewhat familiar. "It's good that Lang Jun likes it." "I also like it," the woman said in a low voice, her face full of shyness. She was petite and dainty, not much taller than Jiang Pingji. Her posture was even more pitiful. When she lowered her head slightly and revealed her fair neck, this simple action could evoke the desire in a man's heart. Pudding is not pudding. Looking at this scene, I suddenly thought of a saying. I feel that it fits the situation very well. The gentleness of lowering one's head is just like the shyness of a water lotus in the cold wind. Dolly Buting, come on, no matter how pretty she is, she's still a prostitute. She's a whore who can sleep with anyone. What water lotus? She's not good enough. Now, what's wrong with the person above? Which word poked your D***ck? You watch the stream quietly, then jump out and step on others to show how clean you are. Xian, exactly. How noble are you to stand on the moral high ground and look down on her. Lanky yubus, before looking down on their work, first consider the context of the era and think from another angle. Don't spout sh*t at the beginning. Where's your quality? Dolly Buting, hee, a bunch of saints. If they were so compassionate, why don't you suggest that the streamer save them? Their mouths are incessant. To put it bluntly, it's easier said than done. They're just whores. What did I say wrong? They're whores that make money when they open their legs. This streamer is also a whore. Jiang Pingji looked at the sudden chaos in the streaming room and frowned. The flames of war had spread to her. Chuyue Wubian, whores are heartless, and entertainers are unjust. I really don't know what's the use of arguing about this. The streamer didn't even say anything. If she didn't control it, the streaming room would become a slaughterhouse. Although Jiang Pingji could ignore the comments, she had a certain understanding of the audience. Once their emotions were extreme, they could say anything disgusting. It was annoying to watch. Streamer V, from the perspective of employment, they're also women in the workplace. They have a job to support themselves. It's just that the job doesn't look good to you. Moreover, it's difficult to survive in today's world. There are countless cases of people selling their children and exchanging their children for food. Although they're despised by others, the quality of their lives is very decent. I don't think others have any right to despise them. I can only say that everyone has their own way of living. It's okay to disagree, but please respect them. Sometimes, Jiang Pingji couldn't understand the thoughts of ancient and modern humans, such as now. In her era, this profession had been legal for thousands of years. It even had its own complete industry chain. From the perspective of federal law, this was in line with human rights because everyone had the right to control their own bodies. This was an inherent wealth. Therefore, she really couldn't understand why the audience in the streaming room were arguing. While she was still in a daze, the pretty girl beside her winked at her. She was young, but she had a kind of youthful and mature charm. She was quite attractive. Her eyes were full of charm, and her full lips seemed to be alluring. Lang Jun, do you like this fragrance? I've smelled it before, so when I smell the fragrance on your body, it's especially familiar. However, although this fragrance smells good, in my eyes, it's not even 1/10,000th of your appearance. I feel like I've seen you in a dream. Lu Shi ate the vegetables with a cold face. The location was not right, so he didn't want to drink at all. He didn't want to be taken advantage of when he was drunk. If the person in front of him was a son, he would throw a fire-repelling painting and find a prostitute to eat. He was devoted to Ah Min, but he couldn't expect his son to be alone. However, the point was, he only had his daughter. To put it crudely, visiting a brothel was nothing, but did his daughter have the tools to commit the crime? The beautiful girl who was chased away by Lu Shi was ignored. Of course, she wouldn't let it go. She covered her lips with an embroidered handkerchief. Her eyebrows were full of charm. She said, Lang Jun, you only care about teasing your sister. Have you forgotten about me? How can that be? It's obvious that my sister is ignoring me. Otherwise, why would she sit so far away? Then. What about this? She moved closer and rested her forehead on his shoulder. If that's the case, do you still blame me for ignoring you? I can't wait to be happy. How can I bear to blame you? Lu Shi, who was silently watching his daughter and the two girls teasing each other, was speechless. Chapter 98. Not long after, a slightly familiar voice floated over, with a hint of hostility. Hee, you old woman. I gave you so much money, but didn't I say that before I leave Hijin County, these two can only serve me? You, on the other hand, took advantage of the fact that I haven't been here for a few days and directly made the decision to have them serve others. Aren't you slapping my face? Without waiting for the madam to speak, a young man's voice, as clear as spring water brushing against a mountain stream, was heard. Lu Shi's eyes lit up. Lu Shi was like Jiang Pingji. Not only was he obsessed with appearances, but he was also obsessed with voices. Forget it, Jingze. If you like it, you can ask 2 more courtesans to serve you. Why do you have to hold on to those 2 and offend them? Hearing the familiar voice, Jiang Pingji could not help but smile. She looked meaningfully at the pretty girl who took the initiative to lean into her arms. TSK. What is this called? It's fate. Tudu Feicho, is there something wrong with my ears? Why do I feel like I heard the young man's voice? Ai Jouting, you didn't hear wrong. I remember Xingze is the courtesy name of Wuma Jun. Wuma Jun and Feng Jin have a good relationship. TSK, TSK, TSK. I feel like my heart is broken. Why is Feng Jin here? Jiang Pingji saw the change in Lu Shi's expression. Although he hated Feng Jin, he didn't seem to recognize his voice. Outside the door, Wuma Jun frowned. He was dissatisfied with Feng Jin's behavior. Feng Jin was always against him. No matter what he said, Feng Jin could refute him. It was annoying and disgusting. The more Feng Jin objected, the more rebellious he became. He pushed aside the brothel keeper with one hand, ignored her pleading eyes, and pushed the door open. The girls who were singing stopped because of the commotion. The two groups of people outside and inside the door looked at each other in silence. Feng Jin, Wuma Jun, Jiang Pingji was not affected at all. She smiled and said, "Sisters, why did you stop?" The faces of the women who were playing and singing stiffened, but they quickly returned to their working state. Their voices were a little soft, sweet, and sticky. It was as if they could penetrate into one's heart. Jiang Pingji was not used to it at first, but after listening to it for a while, she felt that it was quite nice and charming. Even though Feng Jin and Wuma Jun didn't know Lu Shi, they knew Jiang Pingji, Lu Shi's son, Lu Shi. At this moment, it was a little awkward. He cupped his hands and said, "Cough, cough, cough. I didn't know it was Lu Langjun in the room. Please forgive me for being rude." Wuma Jun had the intention to win Jiang Pingji over to his side. Now that he had made such a big mistake, how could he not find a way to make up for it? Feng Jin felt even more awkward and uncomfortable. Were his eyes playing tricks on him? The man who had two beauties on his left and right, who was teasing two girls and laughing so hard, was Lu Shi. A real warrior dared to face the fact that his female companions were drinking and hugging women in the brothel. Feng Jin was slightly embarrassed. Jiang Pingji gestured for him to step into the room. Wuma Jun entered as well. "Huayu, let me introduce you." Jiang Pingji did not think that the atmosphere was not awkward enough. She called out Feng Jin's courtesy name. Of course, Feng Jin did not realize that something was wrong. Close friends always called each other by their courtesy names. However, he did not realize the identity of the man sitting in front of him. Lu Shi, Feng Huayu. Feng Jin looked like he was all ears, but when Jiang Pingji said the first sentence, he could not take it anymore. "This is my father." Feng Jin, Lu Shi's father was Hejian's Lu Shi or Hu County Chief Lu Zhongqing. So, he quietly turned his head to look at Lu Shi, only to find that Lu Shi was also looking at him coldly. What kind of experience was it to be caught in Yingchen house by his father's good friend? Feeling hopeless smiley face 3, angle, Feng Jin braced himself and said, "Uncle Lu." Jiang Pingji did not seem to notice it. She continued to introduce, "Father, this is Feng Jin, whom I mentioned to you before." Lu Shi took a sip of tea and maintained his sitting posture. He did not even raise his eyebrows. He softly responded, "Yes." Wuma Jun's face was twisted. His joy was mixed with fear and panic. He indeed wanted to rope in Lu Zhongqing, but in his plan, he should have paid Lu Zhongqing a visit himself, generously dissecting his own talents and abilities, using his own charisma to pull Lu Zhongqing over to his side and obtain political support. But the result? Their first meeting, Yingchen house. Lu Shi's son. Although Dongqing's officialdom strictly forbade officials from having sex, Lu Shi's position was different from others. This was Hejian County, which was far away from the emperor. No one could use this to shake his position. If they did, there would be no officials in the whole of Dongqing. This is Huayu's good friend, Wuma Jun. His courtesy name is Xingze. Jiang Pingji was probably the only one who could maintain a good mood and enjoy the show. She, a pure woman, was having fun, while the three men looked at each other. The atmosphere was so awkward that it made people feel like they were about to explode. Feng Jin, who had always been eloquent, was now sitting obediently in his seat. His posture was obviously very standard, but in Jiang Pingji's eyes, he was as delicate and pitiful as a quail. He was trembling with fear and was truly quiet like a chicken. She looked around and realized that Lu Shi did not seem to be controlling his aura at all. Jiang Pingji added fuel to the fire. Huayu, do you want me to call a wife over? Feng Jin secretly glared at her. His meaning was obvious. Was she trying to kill him? Lu Shi looked down and spoke like an elder talking to a junior. Huayu, are you married? Feng Jin broke into a cold sweat. He was not afraid of Lu Shi, but he was afraid that the news would spread to his family. Even though he had only accompanied Wuma Jun and had never done anything out of line, no one would believe him. Feng Jin said respectfully, I'm still young. I'm not married yet. Not engaged. Lu Shi continued to ask. He did not care about Wuma Jun. After all, he did not know Wuma Jun well. He did not like Wuma Jun's father, the current emperor of Dongqing. Feng Jin calmed down. He felt that Lu Shi was going to say something. Not engaged yet. In Dongqing, there were many 16-year-old noblemen like Feng Jin who were not engaged yet. He was talented and good-looking. He could make a name for himself before he turned 20. By then, his social status would be different. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he was young and talented. It would be better to talk about marriage. Jiang Pingji secretly glanced at Lu Shi. She was afraid that he would say something about Feng Jin marrying into the Lu family. After all, Lu Shi's drunken words left a deep impression on her. Chapter 99. Feng Jin's eyelids twitched. Xiando was his father's courtesy name. Although he was a junior, he had heard that Lu Shi and Feng Ren were close. As for the words, he has a daughter, Feng Jin was shocked. He was like a bird startled by the mere twang of a bow. However, he had always been smart. He knew that Jiang Pingji's identity as a female was a secret. Few people knew about it, and Lu Shi had no intention of revealing it. Therefore, Lu Shi only had one son. His mistress's daughter was not worthy of Feng Jin's identity. Therefore, he was just being polite. Therefore, Feng Jin did not have to worry that he would be like Jiang Pingji in the future, strong and masculine. Although he did not expect to have a mistress after marriage, he did not want to fight all day. He would still be the one getting beaten up. Your nephew appreciates uncle's kindness. Even if we can't become in-laws, I and Lanting are close friends. We are better than brothers. Then, Feng Jin secretly looked at Jiang Pingji for help. He hoped that his friend could help him attract some attention. I often hear Xianda praise you three brothers. You all have the talent to be a king. If my useless son could be 3 times as capable as you brothers, I wouldn't have to worry about him in the future. Lu Shi said derogatory words about Jiang Pingji, but his expression showed otherwise. Although Feng Jin was not as sweet as his younger brother, he did know how to read people's faces. Uncle, you flatter me. My father scolded me for being stupid and not being flexible. How can I be a king? As for Lanting, although I haven't known her for long, I can see that she has a good mind. She is not as mediocre as you said. He had belittled himself and flattered Jiang Pingji. He secretly wiped the sweat off his forehead. He hoped that the troublesome Uncle Lu would let him go. It was a small matter to be put in a difficult position now. What he was afraid of was that one day he would write to his father and spill the beans. Jiang Pingji looked at the interaction between the two coldly. She snorted softly and turned to talk to Wuma Jun. Is Wuma Langjun also here to seek pleasure? At first, Wuma Jun was quite happy that Jiang Pingji was willing to take the initiative to talk to him to ease the awkward situation of him being ignored. However, she asked such a shameful question, which made him feel a little regretful. It would have been better if he had been ignored. No matter how he answered this question, it didn't seem to work. If he admitted that he was here to have fun, wouldn't that be smearing his own name and causing Lu Zhongqing's first impression of him to fall to rock bottom? If he denied it, it would be even worse. As a man, he dared to take responsibility for his actions. How could he not dare to admit such a small matter? If he didn't have the guts and backbone, what great things could he achieve in the future? After going through the two answers in his mind, Wuma Jun chose to avoid answering because a direct answer would definitely be wrong. I came with Huayu, but why is Lanting here? With that, he could not help but sweep his gaze over the two women, and a wave of displeasure rose in his heart. It was not that he valued the two prostitutes, but he was unhappy that no one had asked for his permission and had touched his people. Even if that person was the son of Lu Zhongqing, whom he wanted to rope in, he still did not like it. However, Wuma Jun would not show his emotions. Instead, he buried them deeper, making it hard for others to see through them. Of course, that did not include Jiang Pingji. Of course, my father brought me here. She told the truth and ignored Wuma Jun's ugly expression, as if he had eaten a fly. He was worried that I would be too curious and would not be able to resist other people's instigation. Instead of that, it would be better for him to bring me here personally to broaden my horizons. The more he tried to stop it, the easier it would cause reverse psychology. If he showed it openly, it would be easier for people to lose interest and treat him with a normal attitude. Wuma Jun could not wrap his head around it. What was the connection between the two? Even so, according to the power of the Lu family, what kind of women can't they get? Why bother to come to such a chaotic place? Wuma Jun did not understand. In his opinion, a normal man would hint to his wife and ask her to arrange a servant girl for his child. What kind of father would bring his son to a brothel? He had never seen or heard of such a thing. Jiang Pingji suddenly smiled. You should not ask me this question. You should ask those who indulge in sensual pleasures and linger in the southern courtyard of the brothel. In terms of wealth and power, they are much more powerful than me. Why do they like to come to this kind of place? Wuma Jun's face froze. At that moment, the pretty girl who was half leaning on Jiang Pingji's shoulder smiled foolishly. Lang Jun, why do you think so? Of course, because the flowers at home are not as fragrant as wild flowers. A legitimate wife, a legitimate concubine, these were all things that were already in the bag. If you want to have sex, you can do it at any time, but the women outside are different. Only those that you can't have are worth thinking about, Jiang Pingji said calmly. There was no longer a smile on her face. She looked at Wuma Jun with sarcasm in her eyes. If the two women had not come to the private room but waited for Wuma Jun obediently, he would have been forgotten after a few times. The main reason he refused to let go of the matter was that he had been humiliated. It had nothing to do with the two women. Don't you think I'm right, Master Wuma? Lu Shi had been paying attention to the situation. He laughed and scolded, what sense? It's all a bunch of twisted logic. Twisted logic is still logic. It's just not as straightforward as other logic. After that, she turned to the girl beside her and whispered something in her ear. The girl's cheeks suddenly turned red. Lang Jun, please come with me. Jiang Pingji stood up and flicked her sleeves. She casually tilted her head and said to Lu Shi, Father, please enjoy your conversation. I won't stay any longer. After that, she followed the two girls out of the private room and went to one of the boudoirs. Lu Shi was speechless. Lu Shi was not the only one who was dumbfounded. Even though Jiang Pingji did not say it explicitly, they could understand what she was hinting at. Was he going to sleep in the same bed with the two girls? 3 girls together. While Feng Jin's nerves were out of control, he secretly observed Lu Shi's expression. But the older, the wiser. If Lu Shi was the kind of rookie who showed his emotions and was seen through by the younger generation, he would not be able to stay in Dongqing's officialdom. Feng Jin could not read the slightest emotion from Lu Shi's face. He could not help but feel suspicious. Could it be that Uncle Lu did not know that Lanting was a girl? Feng Jin suddenly felt awkward. If Lu Shi really did not know and he took the initiative to tell Lu Shi, it would be a despicable act. Apart from that, he could not explain how he knew that Lu Shi was a girl. He could not say that it was a dark and windy night when Lu Shi escaped from the bandits' lair. Her clothes were messy and a corner of her dudu was exposed. Her hair was messy at that time, and it showed that she was a girl. If he dared to say that, he would be courting death. What if Lu Shi asked him to take responsibility for Lu Shi's reputation? Chapter 100. Feng Jin was in a dilemma. Elsewhere, Jiang Pingji arrived at one of the ladies' chambers. The furnishings in the room were warm and elegant, and every corner was filled with the aura of a young girl. You're not feeling well. Drink some sweet water and go to bed early. Jiang Pingji smiled at the pretty girl, Xia and said gently, or should I ask someone to bring you some blood-enriching soup? Xia's eyes lit up, and she looked at Jiang Pingji. Ha! Xia thought Jiang Pingji was there for fun, but she didn't expect her to say that. Chun was at a loss as well. It's your period. Why don't you pay attention? Jiang Pingji said with a smile, don't drink alcohol or eat cold food for the next few days. Period. The two girls looked at each other. Maybe it was psychological, but Xia felt a slight pain in her lower abdomen after hearing Jiang Pingji's words. There was a faint warmth flowing down her lower body. Her face turned red and white, and she didn't know how to react. Jiang Pingji didn't know how women in this era dealt with their periods, but it wasn't easy. I don't know how you girls deal with such situations, so I brought you both here. I'll have to trouble you, Chun to help her out. The faint smell of blood on Xia's body grew stronger, and her fair face turned red under Jiang Pingji's gaze. Most women in the brothel had irregular periods, and many of them had minor problems that they were ashamed of. Xia, for example, had irregular periods every month. When she felt pain, her limbs would turn cold, and even her molars would hurt. She tried to sit properly, but even the slightest movement caused her to twitch in pain, which made her shy and anxious. Jiang Pingji looked at the two girls' reactions and took the initiative to sit behind the screen. She blocked the camera in the streaming room from her view. Doubting, I thought the host would have sex with the girl. I didn't expect her to be on her period smiley face 3, Fanghua I want to repent. When the host left the private room with the girl, I thought there was going to be an erotic scene. I didn't expect it to be for this. Although it's different from what I imagined, the host is super gentle. I wish I had a boyfriend like the host. 1,000 years of parting Wujiang Zhao Kai, same repentance plus 1 Yixiao Qingqing, I'm in a daze. Although I know it's inhumane to laugh at this time, if the host was a man, he would probably be depressed. Just as he was about to have some fun with the girl, she was on her period, she would definitely vomit blood out of depression. Jiang Pingji sat behind the screen. There was a tea table beside her. She poured herself a cup and raised her eyebrows. Host V, that's not right. That's a smile. If I were a man, I might not be depressed and vomit blood in such a situation. After all, there were still the eastern and western palaces to relieve my worries. If Thumbelina wasn't up to it, he could still be a little more beastly, such as Jade blood-cleansing Silver Snatch. Of course, this kind of behavior was too demented. Hee, a bunch of rookies still wanted to compete with her in dirty jokes. Jiang Pingji was surprised and took a sip of tea leisurely. The style of the bullet screen had completely changed. Qianqiu Yubi Wujiang Zhatsai, my streamer is amazing. I didn't expect you to be such a filthy, sick streamer. Sunset Sun, sob 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 sob, old driver is driving the train over there. What did you hear? Tudu Feiqiu, filthy voice. Lovelorn Front Lianming, I'm speechless. I can't believe I'm watching a female streamer act like a hooligan _ smiley face 3, angle _ Bai Gue Yexing, so what if she's a hooligan? If my boyfriend could be like the streamer, no, at least 1/10 of her, I could have sex with him every day. I'd be unhappy if she didn't act like a hooligan. You don't understand, it's better to F***ck her back. Jiang Pingji always complained that she had 3,000 veterans in her streaming room, but she never thought that birds of a feather flocked together. Different streamers would attract different kinds of viewers. She was an experienced veteran, so how could she complain that others were too filthy? Jiang Pingji glanced at the bullet screen of Bai Gue Yexing and thought about it carefully. It was so meaningful. Time passed quietly as people watched the bullet screen and drank tea. The rustling sound of clothes rubbing against each other came from behind the screen, and it gradually quieted down. Not long after, the screen was quietly pushed open. Xia had changed into a new set of clothes, but her face was still flushed. Lang Jun, I'm not feeling well today. I'm afraid I can't serve you. Chun Her continued, if you don't mind my appearance, then. Jiang Pingji smiled and shook her head. The other person's face turned pale. I'm afraid you've misunderstood me. I didn't mean that. Jiang Pingji raised her hand and gestured for them to sit down. Her expression was still gentle. I feel happy and satisfied to be able to look at you two like this. If I do anything else, wouldn't I be desecrating this beauty? It's easy to get love, but it's hard to find a true friend. Both of them were young. They had been bought by the brothel keeper when they were young and trained. They had been prostitutes for a few years. What kind of people had they not seen? Whether it was true or false, it couldn't be hidden from their eyes. Everyone said that whores were heartless and entertainers were heartless. Wasn't it because they had long seen through the hypocrisy of others? How could it be so easy to exchange false feelings for true feelings? Especially the true feelings of prostitutes who had seen through the affairs of the world. What kind of sweet words had they not heard in their daily lives? They just listened to it and didn't take it seriously. But when it came from Jiang Pingji, they subconsciously chose to believe it. When they came back to their senses, they didn't feel that it was wrong. The older Xia smiled bitterly. Lang Jun, you're flattering me. I'm just a broken flower. How can I deserve such praise? People say that beauty is in the bones, not the skin, but I think beauty is in the heart, not the bones. Looks are given by one's parents. No one can choose, but character and temperament are acquired. Both of you have a pure heart in the mortal world. How can you not be beautiful? Jiang Pingji wasn't just praising them. She had her reasons. Most of the women in the brothel had been raised since they were young. Except for a few who were born beautiful and had great potential, most of them were used as maids. They were beaten and scolded at every turn. They were at the bottom of the food chain in the brothel. Not only did they have to face all kinds of customers who made things difficult for them and took advantage of them, but they also had to endure the torture of the women they served. If they were unlucky enough to meet some violent ones, they might lose their lives. Jiang Pingji had a sensitive sense of smell. When she passed by the maids in the hall, she smelled the fragrance of medicine on them. Although their steps were steady, their balance was not natural. It meant that they were injured and had been treated with medicine. Jiang Pingji wasn't familiar with the medicine in this world, so she couldn't smell the ingredients. But one of the medicines was the second lady's decoction. It wasn't very expensive, but it wasn't something that a maid like her could use. If the maids were valued enough to use medicine, why would the brothel allow the customers to humiliate them? It didn't make sense. If it wasn't from the brothel, then where did it come from? When Jiang Pingji smelled the fragrance of Chen Er's makeup, she got the answer. When she arrived, she saw that there was a wooden box in the corner that had not been completely covered, and this small question was solved. Chapter 101. Lang Jun is so young, but you're already so good at sweet-talking. When you grow up, I wonder how many girls you'll disappoint. Love Go Little Say Net W. Chu Xia held the handkerchief in her hand and used it to cover her lips. Even someone like me is tempted, much less the other girls. Jiang Pingji had always been able to tell the difference between truth, lies, and jokes. Miss Xia, you're wrong. Even if it's sweet-talking, there's still a difference. Jiang Pingji continued, to me, all the beautiful girls in the world are as precious as jade plates. Of course, they should be treated with the utmost respect. My sweet-talking is from the bottom of my heart, and it's not frivolous at all. As for other men, if they have bad intentions, even if they can name a flower, they'll still be acting like a hooligan. As soon as she finished speaking, the two girls were amused. They felt as if they had eaten honey. Just as Jiang Pingji said, her words were from the bottom of her heart. That was why they were so touching. Even though the two girls were used to romance, they were still affected. However, they had seen many modest but arrogant gentry. It was the first time they saw one who liked to boast so much. It was a little funny. Xia laughed and said, yes, yes, yes. Lang Jun is a gentleman. Rimu Xiang, life is lovely. JPG. Mama asked me why I kneeled to watch the stream _ smiley face 3, angle, _ Qianqiubi Wujiang Zhatsai. I also kneeled to watch the stream. If I had the streamer's skills, why would I still be single? Jiang Pingji smiled and took the tea made by Xia. Although the ingredients were not as expensive as the ones in the loos, the taste was more exquisite. Love Go Little Say Net W. Chushi felt her body heat up as soon as she took a sip. It warmed her heart and drove away the coldness of early spring. Host V. Qianqiubi Wujiang Zhatsai, that's not right. I've always been single. It didn't mean that she could get rid of her single status. For example, she had a bunch of close friends and brothers, but none of them had developed a relationship. After all, not everyone could endure days without any secrets. The pressure was too great. Qinchou Yubi Wujiang Zha Kai, oh no. After hearing what the host said, I feel like I'm going to be single until I die. In the eyes of many livestream viewers, the prostitutes in the brothels were all prostitutes. Other than stripping and having sex, they seemed to have no other skills. On the other hand, Chen and Xia had taught them a harsh lesson. They knew what it meant to be proficient in the 4 arts. Other than these skills, they were also proficient in the classics and history books. One should know that the literacy rate was so low that it was scary. When he played other musical instruments, he had the demeanor of a master of accumulating points. Under Jiang Pingji's secret guidance, the whole streaming room was in a state of Host V. Some viewers despised them before, but I just want to say that those viewers don't even have the right to despise them. How could the self-restraint of the four arts compare to others? In your era, you would be a top student at the very least. They are not very talented, but in order to survive, they try their best to learn and enrich themselves. This in itself is worthy of respect. Do you have the right to despise them? In my opinion, there is nothing to criticize about them, including the means that you despise to survive by selling your bodies. Jiang Pengji still did not understand where some people in the streaming room got their sense of superiority from. Indeed, there was a generation gap. Rimu Xieyang, that makes some sense. I suddenly thought of some old jokes about transmigration. The female protagonist must go to a brothel to perform a modern hit song and dance, and then people will be shocked. It's funny now that I think about it. After all, the two eras are not only separated by time and space, but also by culture. Some people agreed with Jiang Pingji's opinion, but naturally, there were also people who disagreed. Dolly Buting, a prostitute is a prostitute. No matter how talented she is, she still depends on being F***ked for money. No matter how nice it sounds, she is still a whore. What do you mean, host? When people mock you, you act like your tail was stepped on and you can't wait to whitewash yourself. I can guess that you used to be in this kind of business, right? These days, all kinds of lowly people can transmigrate and become a lady from a rich family. With a change of body, people can't smell your pretentious aura. Jiang Pingji read the comments, but the smile on her face did not disappear. It was not that she had good self-restraint. In fact, her temper had always been terrible. It was just that people could not see the bullet screen in the streaming room. If she suddenly lost her temper, it would definitely scare Xia and Chun, who were sitting beside her. It would not be good to scare beautiful women for the sake of a few ignorant people. She was too lazy to pay attention to them, lest she lowered her status. Facts speak louder than words. She would make them shut up. Time seems to pass very quickly when I'm with Lang Jun. Xia held a cup of wuhong soup that Jiang Pingji had specially ordered. She drank it, which greatly relieved the pain in her abdomen. Her pale face became a little rosier, and her eyes became more watery. Jiang Pingji heard the sound of the night watch outside and silently calculated the time. If you don't mind, can I come visit often? When it comes to poetry, even many of my classmates are not as accomplished as you two ladies. Jiang Pingji smiled sincerely. She said she would come to visit, and she really meant it. If the court allows women to become officials, with your talents, you two will definitely be able to get a seat. When that time comes, you might even be able to become officials of the same court. Jiang Pingji's last sentence was mostly a joke, but the first sentence was a real compliment. Xia blushed, but her eyes were clear. She said, Lang Jun, you're making fun of me. I only read classics and history when I'm free. How can I compare to your classmates? Moreover, this is a brothel. Lang Jun, you have a beautiful woman in your backyard, so you should stay away from this place. Rimu Xieyang, the host's charm can even tempt the ladies in the brothel _ smiley face 3 angle _ chincho yubi wujiang zha kai. I know why the host doesn't want to be single. It must be so that others can't be single. Flirting with all the ladies and raising their standards of choosing a husband, so that most men can't be single. How sinister. Fonghua Zhou, host, can you get that idiot Dolly to stop talking? He's so noisy that I can't watch the stream. Host V, if others want to bark like dogs and show off their manners, why should we stop them? The audience was speechless. What she said made sense, and they were speechless. Ladies, why do you have to belittle yourselves? Jiang Pingji said with a smile, just wait and see. Maybe in the future, women will really become officials and enter the court. Xia and Chun were both focused on the word wife, and did not pay much attention to the latter part of the sentence. Women entering the court as officials. It might have been possible during the period of the 16 Kingdoms or the early years of the Xia dynasty. However, during the Xia dynasty, more and more women were confined to their chambers and backyards. In the current 5 kingdoms, the phenomenon was getting more and more serious. It was even said that in Zhongzhou, which was the most powerful country in China, women could no longer show their faces in public or remarry. At home, their father was the king. After marriage, their husband was the king. If their husband died, their son would be the king. If they lost their virginity, they would drown. If they went out, they would be accused of indecency. Chapter 102. Lungjuan's mouth is so sweet that it has entered my heart. A hoarse old woman's voice came from the door. Jiang Pingji frowned, and Chun He thought she was unhappy. Why would anyone disturb us at this hour? Nothing out of the ordinary happened, but to outsiders, the 2 ladies had entered the room to serve her. Normally, no one would disturb them. Otherwise, what if the guests were to be interrupted when they were in high spirits? What would they do if they became impotent? Xia stood up and smiled. Lang Jun, don't be angry. I'll go take a look. As he finished speaking, he folded his sleeves and left. The sound of the door being pushed open could be heard, followed Xia's doubtful reply. After a while, Xia came in with a bitter smile. She said in a low voice, that was the maid who cleaned the courtyard. She said that a girl ran away. The pimps in the building couldn't catch her. Someone suspects that she is hiding in one of the ladies' rooms. Is that why we have to search your room? Jiang Pingji frowned. She knew very well whether there was another person in the room. If we don't search it, people will gossip. Xia sighed. Because she was clean, she was asked to serve the mysterious guest, Wuma Jun. Her life was more comfortable than the other ladies in the brothel. However, it made the top courtesan unhappy. She might want to humiliate Jiang Pingji. Did the brothel keeper agree to it? Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows and sneered. She knows I'm in this room, but she still asked her to come in. Isn't she trying to spoil the fun? I don't care. I can't be calculative with a brothel keeper. But in the end, you are the one who will suffer. Chun and Xia looked embarrassed. Jiang Pingji said cheerfully, let the maid in. You 2 stay here and don't move. Don't let anyone disturb you. After getting permission, the maid led 2 men in gray linen clothes and green headscarves into the room. They rummaged through the room. The noise outside was getting louder. Xia and Chun looked terrified. It's okay. Don't panic. After a while, the commotion finally died down. Jiang Pingji stood up and walked out of the screen. She looked at the hunchbacked old woman and asked, Old lady, did you find anyone? The old maid bowed slightly and smiled. Her brown face looked a little greasy under the candlelight. There was a big black mole at the corner of her mouth, which made her look a little wretched. I'm sorry to disturb you. I didn't find anyone. I'll go down now. Jiang Pingji nodded, indicating that she could lead them away. This old maid is so rude. How could she make the room so messy? Although Chun had a good temper, she was still a little angry when she saw the makeup and hairpins that had been messed up on the dressing table. When she thought of how the old woman and the 2 pimps had touched her rouge and face powder, and how dirty it was, she suddenly felt nauseous. Check to see if anything is missing. Xia said gently, Mom always suspects us of hiding money. She knows all the places in this building that are suitable for hiding money. She might take this opportunity to let the old maid come in and take the money away. That reminded Chun-er, but she didn't dare to get up when she thought about Jiang Pingji in the room. Don't worry. Nothing is missing. Jiang Pingji looked around and said with a smile, but there are some things that shouldn't be there. Chun-er blinked. Lang Jun, you said nothing is missing. What is there? Yes. Jiang Pingji walked around the room twice and took out 2 green-scented sachets from a place that the 2 ladies didn't know about. Which dirty man does this scented sachet belong to? Xia took a look and thought it was something dirty, so she threw it aside. That's not the main point. The things inside are interesting. Jiang Pingji opened the scented sachet and put some strange dried plants inside. She took some out and sniffed it. She frowned and said, Lady Chun, you know how to make scented medicine. Do you know the effects of these things? Before Chun-er was sold to Ingchun brothel, she was the daughter of a doctor. Because of her father's occupation, she knew some medicine. The 2 ladies looked at each other when they heard Jiang Pingji call them. They stepped forward and examined the scented sachet. They found it familiar. Don't sniff it for too long. It's bad for your brain. Jiang Pingji grabbed Chun-er's fair wrist. I don't know what this medicine is, but it has the effect of confusing one's mind. If you smell it for too long, it's extremely easy to cause your mind to become muddled, your thoughts to be muddled, and you won't know what's going on. Chun-er threw the scented sachet back when she heard that. She suddenly remembered something and her face turned red. She spat on the scented sachet and scolded, which shameless bastard put this in here? It's one thing for the ladies in the brothel to serve their customers, but how dare those eunuchs covet you? How shameless! Jiang Pingji realized that the scented sachet was probably the knockout drug of this era. Xia gritted her teeth and looked terrified. It must have been those 2 pimps who released it. Once they entered the brothel, they would be humiliated for the rest of their lives. She had heard other ladies talk about how the pimps who worked in the brothel bullied them. Jiang Pingji smiled. Did the pimps do it? Not necessarily. Host V, something interesting seems to be happening. Are you guys still sleepy? Do you want to watch a good show? Yimi Yangguang, Did you find something? Ichi Sanqing, I'm confused, but you're still keeping us guessing. You're so bad. Hongjun Laozu de Jua, I feel like you're trying to stir up trouble. Count me in. I'll watch your stream all night. Huaqua de Jua, you're a real man who's destined to stir up trouble. Hongjun Laozu de Jua, TSK. To be precise, the trouble has already been ruined by you. The audience in the streaming room was excited to watch the show. Jiang Pingji had also made a decision. She turned to the 2 ladies and said, You should rest early, especially Xia. Be careful these few days and eat less cold food. Don't be greedy and harm your health. If I'm free, I'll visit you again. If there's any trouble, you can find me at the Lu residence. Feng Huazhou, I feel like these 2 ladies are to your liking. Why don't you save them from this hell? Jiang Pingji glanced at the bullet screen and met Xia's eyes. She nodded at her and said goodbye. Why not? Host V, probably because I can't save them. There are countless prostitutes who are more pitiful than them. If I want to save any of them, how can I save all of them? To really save them, you can't just take them away from here. You have to rebuild their broken backs. To really save them, you have to change the root cause of their current situation. Maybe she could do it. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.